Chapter 1407. Oh. Everyone's eyes lit up when they heard that. Phyllis had given such high praise, so it seemed like Meg's new dish would definitely be very good. It is indeed an unforgettable smell. Camilla cut the last green bean into the size of a grain of rice. She nimbly removed the thin daggers from her fingertips, then looked at Meg, and said, "My work is done. I'll make a move first." "Aren't you going to have lunch before you leave?" Meg asked. "No, I don't think I like the smell," Camilla answered very decisively as she started to take off her apron. Everyone looked at Camilla with more confusion. Phyllis had praised the new dish, but from the looks of it, Camilla didn't seem to like it. She didn't even want to stay for lunch with everyone. This situation had never happened before. Such a huge contrast was puzzling. Ding! Just then, the oven made a reminder that it was time. Meg opened the oven door casually. A strong aroma wafted out of the restaurant along with the hot air. Wow! It smells so good. Amy's eyes lit up as she looked at the oven in surprise. What a strange smell. "I can't describe it, but it's just very strange," Barbara said with a frown as she covered her nose. Everyone had different expressions. Although they weren't too exaggerated, they all looked at the oven with surprise. What kind of smell was this? Meanwhile, Camilla instantly disappeared from the kitchen, leaving only an apron that slowly fell to the ground. She was already at the entrance of the restaurant, ready to open the door and leave. "Wait," Meg called out as he walked toward Camilla. Camilla stopped in her tracks and turned back to look at Meg. She frowned slightly and held her breath at the same time. "Have lunch before you leave," Meg said with a smile as he walked up to Camilla. "Ha, I will never touch that kind of strange thing." Camilla looked as if she would rather die than submit. "Last night, when I used the photo stone to commemorate my handsomeness today, I accidentally left a strange image. The taste of roast beef wrapped in lettuce should be good, right?" Meg leaned close to Camilla and whispered in her ear. Camilla's eyes instantly widened as she looked at the smiling Meg. However, in her eyes, his smile was filled with treachery. "Why don't you go back after lunch?" "I've prepared your portion for lunch," Meg asked again with a smile. "Despicable. Shameless. Scumbag." Camilla gritted her teeth and said softly. She stomped her feet in annoyance and walked back reluctantly. She didn't expect that Meg would take advantage of her precarious situation and use a shadow recording stone to record the scene of her eating grass. If this were to spread, then her reputation in this lifetime would be ruined. "Can't you get over being a scumbag for the rest of your life?" Meg raised his eyebrows. She could choose not to eat durian, but she definitely had to try the durian pizza. Everyone smelled the strange smell. Although it wasn't very strong, it was indeed very strange and had a strong dissuading effect. They were all a little puzzled as to why this new product would emit such a strange smell. "Have a seat," Meg said to everyone and walked toward the kitchen. He put on gloves and took out 4 12-inch pizzas from the oven, as well as a 6-inch pizza. He used a knife to divide them evenly. Then, he carried the tray to the big round table and placed the pizzas in the center. The huge pizza was covered with a layer of golden durian. The surface was a little burnt yellow because of the baking. The aroma of the butter was mixed with the aroma of the durian, and it spread in all directions along with the heat. Gulp. Amy swallowed her saliva and was already drooling. Phyllis was also looking at the durian pizza in amazement. She didn't expect the delicious durian to be processed into such a beautiful and exquisite food. It was just like a cake, except that it was shorter than a cake. Everyone was also amazed by the appearance of the durian pizza. The aroma of the mixture of durian and butter was much milder than the smell of durian alone. For everyone, the aroma was just a little strange. Are we having this for lunch today? Irina came down from upstairs and looked at the 5 durian pizzas on the table. She frowned slightly when she smelled the smell in the air and looked at Phyllis with some doubts. This is a durian pizza. It's a new product I made. I'll invite everyone to taste it at noon. Meg nodded with a smile. Princess, this is a durian pizza. Phyllis looked at Irina and repeated. So, what you just ate was durian too? Yes. Phyllis nodded quickly, feeling as if her grievances had been cleared. What a strange smell. Irina frowned and walked over to sit beside Amy. Adults eat big pizzas while children eat small pizzas, right? Amy asked with sparkling eyes as she turned to look at Meg. Yes, this small pizza is specially prepared for Amy. Meg nodded and reached out to pick up the 6-inch pizza and put it in front of Amy. Great, then I'll start eating. Amy's eyes lit up and she directly reached out to grab a slice of pizza that was cut into a triangular shape. When she pulled it up, the durian meat almost merged with the pizza. Amy raised the pizza in her hand high and caught the long cheese with her mouth. She slowly ate the cheese like a lamb eating grass, then opened her mouth and took a big bite of the pizza. Amy let out a soft sigh and then chewed the pizza happily. Her face was filled with a happy smile as if she was eating candy. After swallowing, she immediately took another bite and pulled it out. The long cheese looked very tempting. Amy's eyes lit up. She swallowed the pizza and continued to eat the cheese in small bites as if she was playing an interesting game. Looking at Amy eating the pizza happily, everyone's throats couldn't help but move. Sure enough, Amy was Meg's best partner. No matter what food it was, as long as they saw her eat it once, they would find it delicious. Help yourself. Meg put on a pair of disposable gloves and reached out to pick up a slice of pizza. The continuous cheese looked very satisfying, and the shape and color had reached a perfect state. This was the real pinnacle of durian pizza. Meg opened his mouth and took a bite of the pizza. The aroma of durian and cream instantly filled his mouth. The slightly crispy bottom collided with the smooth and delicate durian layer between his teeth. At this moment, it was like a match made in heaven, bringing an ultimate delicious feast to his taste buds and brain. Meg felt as if he was suddenly surrounded by durian. It was a swamp with endless attraction that made people want to sink into it. No pop-up window. Chapter 1408. After the durian was roasted, its texture became more delicate and smooth, making it impossible to ignore its existence and deliciousness. The slightly crispy pizza could not be more wonderful when paired with the durian. As a non-durian pizza lover, Meg felt that he had fallen in love with this delicacy. Eating one bite after another, Meg did not want to waste time to make any comments, because even pausing would be disrespectful to this delicacy. Looking at the father and daughter eating happily, Phyllis, who could not forget the durian, could not help but pick up a piece of durian pizza first. She was now very curious about the taste of the delicious durian meat after it was made into the so-called pizza. Phyllis opened her mouth and took a bite, and her eyes suddenly lit up. The delicate texture of the durian did not disappear because of the heating, but instead felt like it was catalyzed by the heat. The texture was sweet and gentle, but also very impactful, making the mouth completely immersed in the durian's fragrance. The flatbread under the durian served as a perfect foil. The crispy texture and the rich milky fragrance brought an extremely rich taste to this bite of durian meat. Although it looks strange, it seems to be good. Irina also reached out and picked up a piece of durian pizza. She took a bite and frowned slightly, then gradually relaxed, and revealed a somewhat stunned and intoxicated expression. Compared to the smell, the texture and taste of this so-called durian pizza were extremely unique and delicious. Well, I didn't expect it to be so delicious. After eating it, smelling this smell again is a different feeling. I can suddenly feel this delicacy. Irina swallowed the pizza in her mouth and nodded. After getting the verification of the 4 people, everyone except Camilla could not wait any longer. They reached out and picked up a piece of pizza, and then took a big bite. Exclamations and soft moans rose and fell one after another. The deliciousness of the durian pizza was more direct than its fragrance. The sweetness after it melted in the mouth was unexpected and irresistible. Is it really so delicious that it emits such a strange smell? Camilla frowned and looked at everyone who was already intoxicated with the durian pizza, and thought with some doubts in her heart. But soon, she sneered in her heart and said to herself, "Ha, I think you are all playing me. Camilla, everyone is eating. Don't you want to try it?" Meg smiled at Camilla, and curled his lips as he said, "Or do you want me to make a salad for you alone? Add a point to life." "No need, I'll just eat this." Camilla suddenly raised her voice and interrupted Meg. At the same time, she quickly grabbed a piece of pizza in front of her and glanced at Meg's neck with murderous eyes. If eyes could kill, Meg's head would have fallen off 18 times. Due to the threat of being exposed for eating grass, Camilla looked at the durian pizza in her hand and smelled the aroma that came along with the heat. Speaking of which, after smelling it carefully, it didn't seem that bad. No. I just swore, even if I die." Camilla shook her head firmly and paused. If the matter of eating grass is exposed, it will be worse than death. Moreover, he had purposely used the shadow recording stone to record the scene of her eating grass. He definitely had ulterior motives. Even if he couldn't do it himself, he would use the things in the shadow recording stone to keep her by his side as a vase, or even worse. She heard that some people who couldn't do it would have some strange fetishes. Looking at the perverted smile on his face when he was playing with the leather whip, he was definitely not a good person. Isn't it just a piece of durian pizza with a terrible smell? Even if I seal my sense of smell and eat it with my eyes closed, I won't let your evil scheme succeed. Camilla gritted her teeth and thought in her heart. Then, she fiercely took a bite of the durian pizza. The delicate and smooth durian meat and the crispy crust of the pizza brought an extraordinary feeling between the teeth. After entering her mouth, the durian meat melted directly on the tip of her tongue, and the sweet taste instantly bloomed. The strong fragrance and taste almost caused her brain to shut down. At that moment, she lost her ability to think. She couldn't understand how there could be such a sweet and wonderful taste in this world. How can it be so delicious? Camilla's mind was in a daze, but the taste buds on the tip of her tongue were exceptionally sensitive and clear. They greedily catered to the wonderful and sweet taste. The sweetness of the durian, the aroma of the cheese and cream, and the texture of the bread. Her soul and oath had already sunk into the depths of chewing. Phew! After swallowing a mouthful of pizza, Camilla couldn't help but take a deep breath. She felt as if she had forgotten to breathe and almost suffocated to death. "It's so delicious!" Camilla exclaimed from the bottom of her heart. "Yes, it's a good thing that father made you stay. Otherwise, big sister Camilla, you would have missed out on a delicious dish," Amy said with a smile. She was already eating her 3rd piece of pizza. Camilla was stunned. She didn't expect her psychological defenses to be so easily destroyed by this delicious pizza, and she even said such heartfelt words. Looking at the smile on Meg's face, she became more and more annoyed, and her face flushed red. This guy definitely did it on purpose. He purposely used that strange smell to make me misunderstand, then slapped me in the face. But the durian pizza was just too delicious. Furthermore, after tasting the pizza and smelling the aroma, the feeling instantly changed. It was indeed not a stinky smell, but a smell that was so rich that it was hard to get used to. Looking at the pizza in her hand that had a crescent-shaped gap, she couldn't help but take another bite. What eating grass, what swearing not to eat it, what sleeping on the floor for a night. She didn't care about any of that now. She just wanted to immerse herself in this wonderful taste and make time go slower. Sure enough, no one can resist the deliciousness of the durian pizza. Meg retracted his gaze and continued to taste the delicious pizza. From everyone's reaction, their acceptance of the durian pizza was not bad, but how to let everyone accept this initial taste was the biggest problem. Of course, there were one or two dishes that didn't sell so well, but Meg didn't care. It was good to keep it for himself. Ding! Detected the host's negative attitude towards food, triggered hidden mission. Please sell 100 durian pizzas within 3 days. Completed mission, received the title of Durian Promotion Ambassador and a chance to spin the Master Chef's wheel. Failed mission, all durian pizza ingredients and kitchen utensils will be taken back. The system's voice sounded in Meg's mind. Chapter 1409. What? Durian Promotion Ambassador. Meg raised his eyebrows. He almost could not control his emotions and blurted it out. The promotion of every kind of food is a great step forward, especially for a controversial food like durian. It's very difficult to make the public accept it. However, every food deserves to be tried and liked. This requires the promotion ambassador to work tirelessly. Shut up. These useless titles are not like collecting cards to exchange for a big gift pack. What's the point of using them? Meg cut off the system's words. He wasn't interested in these meaningless titles, but he was quite interested in the prize wheel. He recalled that he still had 2 chances that he hadn't used yet, and he was saving them up for the 3rd chance to exchange for a premium dish. He did not know what the system meant by a high-class dish, but it should not be bad if it was on the same level as the Buddha jumps over the wall. The title of a chef represents the highest honor. How can it be measured by a big gift pack? The system said seriously. It paused for a while and said, I just looked through the manual and found out that after collecting 10 of these titles, you can exchange for a big mystery gift pack from the system, eh? There's really one. Meg's eyes lit up. Although he did not know what was in the big mystery gift pack, since he had to collect 10 big gift packs to exchange for it, it should not be bad. However, these titles seemed to only appear after the hidden mission was triggered. It was very accidental. He already had a few titles on him, You're a Good Person, Guardian of the Base, and so on. He was still some distance away from collecting 10 titles. 100 titles in 3 days. If he withdrew from the mission tomorrow, he would only have 2 days left. Selling 100 durian pizzas in 2 days, Meg thought for a while and accepted the mission confidently. At most, he would just be a little mysterious and let the customers order. He was not afraid of the customers flipping the table. After all, there was a group of bosses in the restaurant. If they ordered it, they would eat it obediently. As long as they ate it, Meg was not worried that they would be dissatisfied. Looking at Camilla, who was licking her fingers and staring at the second durian pizza, was the best evidence. Once you ate it, you would fall in love with it. After eating it, you would be reluctant to part with it. What was so difficult about selling 100 servings? The 5 durians were finished in no time. Everyone licked their lips, still wanting more. Meg served each of them a portion of tofu pudding according to their tastes, and lunch was finally over. Boss, this durian pizza is delicious. Are you releasing a new item today? Yabamiya asked curiously as he cleaned up the table. Yes, we'll launch it tonight. Meg nodded. He suddenly remembered that he had to go to the Wind Forest with Irina the day after tomorrow. If he delayed the launch of the durian pizza until tomorrow, it meant that he only had 1 day to complete the task, which would increase the difficulty of the task. After cleaning up the table and taking a short break, the busy lunch business began again. It's so comfortable to live on the island. With the sea breeze, even the air smells good. Great, I can only hide in Chaos City for a while. I can go back and clear my name after this incident blows over. Tony pressed down on his straw hat and jumped down from his flying steed. He carried a box, and walked towards Chaos City's city gate with a helpless expression. Damn you, Boss Hades, you better not let me see you again. Tony thought to himself hatefully, but soon, a hint of bitterness appeared on his face. He sighed softly. Speaking of which, I really want to meet him again. Crayfish is so delicious. Other than him, no one else can make it taste so good. Chaos City, I'm here. I hope you won't disappoint me in the next few months. Tony pressed down on his straw hat and quickened his steps. He heard that there was a restaurant in Amy's that was very popular recently. It appeared on the cover of Gourmet magazines many times, and that vegetarian book even created a sales miracle because of that. He was not interested in vegetarian dishes or meat. He only liked seafood. However, since he was in Chaos City, there was no reason not to try such a restaurant. He seriously doubted the standard of that person in the same industry. What was there to brag about with a vegetarian dish? Eggplant with garlic sauce. Shouldn't it be seafood with fish? If he had to force himself to call it a vegetarian dish, the barrier to entry was really getting lower and lower. How could such a magazine have such explosive sales? What was wrong with this world? After entering the city, he flagged down a horse-drawn carriage. He happened to be hungry, so he boarded the carriage and directly said to the coachman, "Take me to your best restaurant." "You're talking about Amy's, right? If you go there now, they'll probably be closed." "You might not be able to eat there," the coachman said with a smile. "Closed so early? Is this how they do business?" Tony was stunned. It was only noon now. He had just gotten off his flying steed, and he was so hungry that his chest was sticking to his back. "It will take half an hour to get to Amy's from here. They close at 1 p.m. sharp, so it's indeed too late," the coachman replied. "Seems like you're a regular customer there. You know so much about them." Tony looked at the coachman in surprise. "How is that possible? Their food is not something that people like me can afford. I have to save up some money occasionally. I can only sneak in a Lagi Ruggiamo when I have 300 copper coins. However, that taste is really unforgettable." The coachman was so enraptured that he couldn't help but swallow his saliva. He touched his pocket and said with a smile, "I'll be able to eat there again in 2 days." The coachman's behavior piqued Tony's interest in Mamie restaurant. He took out a gold coin, and handed it to the coachman as he said, "Keep the change. Just deliver it to the entrance of Mamie restaurant. Since you're open for business, how can you keep customers outside?" "I'm a pro, just what? I dragged such a big box all the way here." Tony forced a smile. This kind of feeling was really uncomfortable. "All right, I'll send you there. If they close later, I'll send you to another place." Seeing that Tony was so generous, the coachman didn't say anything else. He put away the gold coin and drove the carriage away. About half an hour later, the horse-drawn carriage stopped outside Mamie restaurant. The coachman lifted the curtain and said to Tony, who was about to fall asleep, "Look, isn't this door closed? Shall I send you to another restaurant for your meal?" Tony shivered from the cold wind. He looked outside after hearing the coachman's words. A large restaurant appeared in his line of sight. The exquisite shop and decoration showed off its uniqueness. However, the restaurant's door was closed, and there was a wooden plaque hanging on the door, "Closed." "I don't believe that they won't receive customers." Tony jumped down from the carriage and walked to the restaurant's door. He reached out and pulled the bell hanging on the door. Chapter 14:10. The crisp sound of the bell accompanied by the rumbling of the stomach rang outside the restaurant for a long time. Tony grabbed the hemp rope, and only managed to resist the urge to knock on the door after a long while. He withdrew his hand awkwardly. Not only was he not going to receive him, but he was also not even bothered to look at him. It's your first time here, so you don't know the boss's temper. Even if our city lord came, Mr. Mac wouldn't open the door to welcome him when it's not business hours, let alone you. The coachman looked at Tony with a smile and a hint of pride in his eyes. This is the best restaurant in our Chaos City, and it deserves to be the face of the restaurant. Mr. Mac was even the god of cookery who won first place in the Roth Empire's King's Palace banquet. He definitely has a temper. All right, then I can only come and eat at night. Tony walked back to the horse-drawn carriage helplessly, but he was cursing in his heart. What god of cookery? Could he make something as delicious as the spicy crayfish? In his eyes, Hades was the real god of cookery. Just those 3 crayfish dishes were enough to make him a god. The locomotive is moving normally, and the bumps are within the acceptable range. The lane-changing sensitivity still needs to be fine-tuned, and the braking system has met the braking requirements. Meg stood at the front of the locomotive, and spoke confidently as he looked at the hill. Chief Engineer Burrell and a group of steam locomotive engineers listened attentively. They nodded from time to time and frowned from time to time, but most of their faces were glowing with excitement. Meg paused for a while and smilingly said, "The test this time is very successful. We only need to optimize a few of the small problems that I mentioned just now, and we can cut into the actual track trial operation." That's great. Burrell clenched his fists tightly. Although he tried to restrain himself, the veins on his red face still popped out. We did it. We finally did it. Cheers broke out in the locomotive base instantly. The engineers and staff threw their hats up and shouted excitedly. Some even shed tears of excitement. In order to turn the steam locomotive from a drawing into a real thing that could run on the track, this group of people had put in a lot of hard work. They had worked late into the night, and hadn't returned home for months. All their hard work had paid off in an instant. When Meg saw this scene and heard the excited shouts, his heart also surged. Perhaps that group of great people felt the same way when they saw the mushroom cloud rising in the desert. You have created a miracle, Meg said solemnly as he looked at Blair and all the engineers present. Although he was the one who provided the blueprint, it was indeed a miracle that a group of people who had no idea what a steam engine was or why it could push a bunch of wheels and carry a lot of heavy objects forward were able to build this steam locomotive bit by bit. Hill looked at this scene with a smile on her face. Although she did not understand the lines on the drawings, she knew how much work these engineers had done. The steam locomotive was completed half a month earlier than expected, giving them more time to carry out their plan. Now, there was probably nothing more important than time. After the steam locomotive passes the trial run, everyone can go home and have a month of paid vacation. In addition to the salary that will be paid to your families on time every month, you will also receive a bonus. Hill looked at everyone and smiled. The cheers stopped for a while, and then broke out into even more excited cheers. The bonus from Miss Hill had never disappointed anyone. With a generous bonus, they returned home after a few months of separation. The salary that had increased several times in the past few months was equivalent to several years of work in the past. A month of paid vacation could also make up for the time they were separated from their families. Blair and Meg discussed some technical issues, and then Meg and Hill left the base in the same carriage. I think we should have a drink. Hill looked at Meg, who was sitting opposite her, and said with a smile. This is a good suggestion, but it's a pity that I have to go back and prepare for the evening business. Meg smiled and glanced at his watch. Today was indeed a good day. Being able to see the steam locomotive traveling on the tracks of the other world and listening to the sound, Meg already felt that a new era was coming. The steam locomotive that spewed out white fog would inevitably change this world and accelerate the integration of this world. Violence could not solve the problem. The world that was unified by Qin Shi Huang was still divided and united in the end. Thus, they might as well break the borders and let them integrate with each other. In the past, they did not want to travel far because of the inconvenience of transportation. If they bought a train ticket at their doorstep, they could travel all over the world. With a wide range of knowledge, they would not be easily fooled into fighting and killing. In this world, in addition to fighting and killing, there were so many beautiful scenery and delicious food to enjoy. Why should they risk their lives for others? Meg did not hold the throat of this world's fate, but he might have thrown a handful of Croton into the throat of this world. As for how it would develop next, he could only try his best to be on the same side as Chaos City and try his best to control the overturning dragon that was technology and stir up the integration of the world. However, it was best not to capsize the boat. Hill looked into Meg's eyes. Those clear eyes were still as calm as water. It was as if the steam locomotives coming online had nothing to do with him. This calmness and composure made her feel a little inferior. Although she looked very calm now, only she knew the feeling of her heart racing when she heard Meg say that the steam locomotive's test drive was successful. This could be an important moment that could change the world. Even when she was on the horse-drawn carriage, her mind was still a little muddled. However, Meg was the one who came up with the idea of the steam locomotive. He was also the one who drew the blueprint. Even the first model was made by him. However, other than showing some emotion when he was cheering with all the engineers in the cave, his expression and emotions didn't change much. In the future, you might be a tycoon who controls 10% of the world's transportation lifelines. Do you still care so much about cooking for your customers? Hill asked as she looked into Meg's eyes. Perhaps he had not realized what had just happened meant. When money reaches a certain amount, it is just a string of numbers. Miss Hill should know this better than I do. Meg looked at Hill with a smile, and said, however, the joy of cooking cannot be measured by money. Cooking for your customers and watching them immerse themselves in it and feel happy is a blissful thing. The system beeped. Chapter 14:11. The Hill was stunned for a moment. He looked at Meg in a different way. He was curious, surprised, and a little sympathetic. Yes. From the moment she was born, money was just a number to her. No one knew how much money Buffett Banks had. It was a huge number that would make dragons and kings jealous. She knew. It was a string of meaningless numbers, at least to her. Yes, in fact, what's the use of money? What's the use of wealth? I've never touched money. I'm not interested in money. The Hill laughed self-deprecatingly. It's just that they all think I work hard for more money. Is there a difference between having more or less zeros behind that string of numbers? Meg looked at the Hill and suddenly fell into deep thought. It seemed that he had met his match. The way rich people pretended to be rich was always so similar. But he couldn't refute it. After all, he thought the same way back then. Yes, there's no difference. So he nodded in agreement. In fact, our family is just an ordinary family. There's nothing special about it. At most, our house is a little bigger. The Hill said with some helplessness, but when I was a child, every time I brought my friends home, I would always lose a few of them. Is it a big deal to get lost in someone else's house? That's not it. Meg shook his head. If it were him, his young heart couldn't accept such an invisible way of showing off his wealth. Mr. Meg, you're really special. The Hill smiled and gently touched a small raised bead beside his hand. The secretary quickly came in from outside the carriage and took out a bottle of red wine and 2 crystal goblets from the carriage's closet. He pulled the cork and a strong aroma of red wine spread in the carriage. He poured the red wine into a decanter to soak for a while, then poured it into the goblets and gently placed them on a small table between Meg and the hill. Then he bent over and left the carriage. "That's why I still want to have a drink with you." Hill raised his wine glass and swirled it between his fingers as he looked at Meg with a smile. Meg glanced at the wine glass in front of him and the Hill who was looking at him. He hesitated for a moment before reaching out to pick up the wine glass. "As you wish." Meg raised his glass and clinked it with Hill's before taking a sip of the wine. This was the best V-grade wine from Buffett Winery. It had a rich aroma and a mellow taste. It was slightly different from the system's special brews, but it was still a top-notch wine. Along the way, she spoke more than usual on the Hill. Although she still restrained herself and didn't talk too much about life, Meg clearly felt that her guard against him had dropped a lot. "Acting tough is probably a good way to get close to someone," Meg muttered as he got out of the carriage and watched the luxurious carriage gradually disappear into the distance. Meg turned around and saw Irina leaning against the door and sizing him up. "Where did you go?" Just as he was about to speak, Irina walked over with her long legs and sniffed him. "You reek of alcohol. Did someone ask you out for a drink in the middle of the day? And the smell of perfume. Woman." Then who was the woman in the carriage? The series of questions and the dangerous aura in her eyes made Meg nervous. He answered honestly, "Hill Buffett, the current boss of Buffett Banks. I went to discuss a business deal worth a few $100 million with her at noon. It's normal to drink a little when discussing business." "A few $100 million." Irina's eyes narrowed slightly. It was as if countless knives and swords were dancing in her eyes. Meg felt a chill run down his back. He quickly said, "It's not what you think. Come, let's go in. I'll tell you slowly. You'd better tell me what kind of posture you use to discuss a business deal worth a few $100 million. Irina's mouth curved into a dangerous arc. She turned and walked into the restaurant. I was just sitting." Meg looked innocent. What kind of posture could he use to discuss it? After entering the restaurant, Meg locked the door and made sure that there was no third person in the restaurant. He went to sit opposite Irina. "Can a rich woman make you feel happy?" Irina looked up and asked as soon as Meg sat down. "It's okay. We had a good talk, and the results were." Meg nodded and paused. He suddenly felt that his words sounded a little wrong. "Ha ha. Hey. Honey, don't misunderstand. We're talking about business seriously," Meg said as he looked at Irina, who took out her foldable chair slowly. "Do you still remember the steam engines that the factory sent over a few days ago? Miss Hill is my collaborator on the steam engine project. Other than that, she, Chaos City, and I have also developed a railway project together. A steam locomotive powered by a steam engine will travel on the railway to the Goblin's Vic Mountain. A few years ago, I went to the locomotive base for a trial run, and it has basically reached the operating standards. That's why I drank some wine on the way back." "Steam locomotive." Irina put down her foldable chair slowly and looked at Meg perplexedly. "It's a huge horse-drawn carriage that will never get tired. It can pull hundreds of people and move forward quickly on the paved railway. Furthermore, it doesn't need to rest or feed during the journey. Then, what does it eat? You'll be fine after eating some coal. Isn't that a little too much? It's okay. I'll even add water to it. That's more like it." Meg looked at Irina, who kept her foldable chair, and heaved a sigh of relief. He put his butt back on the chair, and nodded with a smile. "Because the base is outside the city, Miss Hill sent me back on the way." Nothing happened. Irina glanced at Meg and calmly said, "I'll just take it that way. That's clearly the way it is." Meg grumbled in his heart. However, it was better to keep it to himself. He smiled and said, "It must have been very tiring for you to train the night elves today. Do you want to eat or drink anything? I'll make it for you." "I want to eat durian pizza and a pot of green tea," Irina said after thinking for a while. "All right, I'll make it for you." Meg got up and walked to the kitchen. He brewed a pot of green tea, poured a cup for Irina, and placed it in front of her. Then, he turned and went back to the kitchen to make the durian pizza. Irina propped her chin on her hand and rested it on the table. Through the steam, she looked at Meg, who was busy in the kitchen with his back facing her, and a smile appeared at the corner of her lips. He looked so handsome when he was holding a sword. He looked even more mesmerizing when he put on an apron and picked up a cleaver. Chapter 14:12. The 6-inch small durian pizza was undoubtedly the most wonderful existence for afternoon tea. Irina ate the durian pizza, and her mood became relaxed and joyful. Her body also swayed rhythmically. Tactical retreat. Meg looked at Irina, who was swaying back and forth like a roly-poly toy. Whenever she swayed back, she would take a bite of the pizza. It was similar to how Amy would sway left and right uncontrollably when she ate something delicious. Irina looked at the half-eaten pizza, and hesitated for a while before saying to Meg, "You can have one piece. I heard the amount of food you eat is related to your family status." Meg sighed softly, and picked up a piece of pizza. Irina glanced at Meg and calmly said, "Then you can only lick the plate." "Ha!" Meg was stunned. He felt as if an arrow had shot through his heart. Has life become so difficult? Why is Chaos City so active in promoting the railway that you mentioned? Isn't it just a chariot that eats coal? Doesn't a horse-drawn carriage run as well? Irina asked as she ate. The various races are about to hold a peace negotiation. If they can reach an agreement and renew the peace treaty, it won't affect Chaos City. However, if the peace treaty breaks down, and the Norland continent falls into war again, Chaos City, a city that was built after the war, will be in a very awkward position. From the looks of it, the possibility of renewing the peace treaty is not very high. A few races that have become more powerful in the past 100 years are all thinking of redividing their territories, or devouring a few weaker races. Therefore, Chaos City had to do something to change the situation. They had to lay down the railway and test-run the steam locomotives. This was to show the world the possibility of the future. Travel and communication between different races would become smoother and more convenient, and the economy would also improve along with the laying of the railway. Apart from war, there are other ways for the various races to rise, Meg explained. Actually, this was also the reason why he threw the steam engine to the hill back then. Opening up a certain amount of technology to solve the problem of food, clothing, and travel in this world would ease the conflict. It sounds like a good suggestion, but for the rulers, they won't give up the chance to rule the world just because they have an additional means of travel. Irina looked at Meg and shook her head slightly. They always travel on flying mounts. This is indeed a problem. Meg nodded in agreement. However, what we need to change is not the thinking of the rulers, but the ordinary people, who have a larger population. War is harmful to them. Even if we win in the end, it will not bring them any benefits. And if they are unwilling to fall into the quagmire of war, the possibility of the entire world falling into a full-scale racial war like 100 years ago will be greatly reduced. Irina looked into Meg's eyes and pondered for a while. Then, she ate the small piece of pizza in her hand and revealed a smile. Sounds interesting. When the train starts running, I will try it. Oh, yes. Someone sent some steel parts to the factory this afternoon. They said they were custom-made by you. Are those the machines you were talking about? Irina suddenly recalled this matter. Yes. I will make a trip to the factory tomorrow to teach the night elves how to assemble the machines. After the machines are assembled and tested, we can start work." Meg nodded. After tea time, Meg cleared the table. Soon, Phyrus and Camilla arrived. Meg wrote a new product announcement on the notice board, and hung it on the door. He had to complete the mission of making 100 durian pizzas well. Amy's was already known by everyone in Chaos City. It was undoubtedly the #1 restaurant. As for Dukas Restaurant, which had dominated for many years, it quickly faded into the crowd. There were even people who divided the restaurants in Chaos City into two types, Amy's and other restaurants. And the extremely high reputation brought about an increasing number of customers. In order to make it easier for the customers to line up, the Aiden Square management even opened up a small path in front of the restaurant so that the queuing crowd could extend into the square. And Amy's popularity also made the southwest corner of Aiden Square, which originally had no commercial vibes, become lively. Many dilapidated shops were rented at high prices, and shops and restaurants opened one after another. A new hot spot in the business circle appeared. As the customers who came late and couldn't make it in time were diverted to those restaurants, it brought them a lot of traffic. It's only 4:30 p.m. Is this even fun? Tony stood outside Amy's and looked at the long line that extended into the square. He felt that he had shown enough respect by coming to line up half an hour earlier. He didn't expect that he still underestimated the coachman's words. "You must line up early. Otherwise, you won't even be qualified to line up. I want to see if the taste is right for such a long line." Tony slowly made his way to the back of the line, but he was still calm. After all, he wasn't hungry now. "Hurry up, the line is about to reach the limit. If you miss it, you'll have to wait until tomorrow if you want to eat spicy hot pot." A group of people hurriedly jogged past Tony and ran to the back of the line. Why are they in such a hurry? Tony frowned, and then looked back. There were about a dozen people running toward him with menacing expressions. Holy fuck! Tony's footsteps unconsciously quickened. He could feel the breathing behind him getting closer and closer, and he couldn't help but start running. When he finally reached the back of the line, he immediately lined up at the back and heaved a sigh of relief. Sure enough, after 3 more people lined up behind him, a beautiful lady came over with a wooden sign, and asked the customer to help her hold the sign to inform them that the line had ended. Tony heaved a sigh of relief, and looked at Vanessa, who was also panting slightly, in front of him, and asked, "Miss, are all your meals so exciting? We went out to play today and didn't pay attention to the time, so we almost missed it. Usually, we line up an hour earlier. If we line up at the front, we can quickly eat delicious food. When it's our turn today, I don't know if we can still eat hot pot." Vanessa glanced at Tony, a demon uncle who looked quite energetic, and said regretfully, "Hot pot. Is it a hot pot?" It was the first time Tony heard of this dish, and he couldn't help but be curious. "No, it's a kind of cooking method. Is this your first time at Amy's? Then you can try it. It's super delicious," Vanessa said with a smile, revealing a mouth of neat and beautiful teeth. Chapter 14:13. All right, I'll think about it. Tony also nodded with a smile. He was rather surprised that this beautiful human girl wasn't fearful of him at all. As expected, Chaos City was very special. There were all kinds of races everywhere, and everyone lived in harmony with one another. Ever since he had arrived here, he hadn't received any strange looks. Even the elves didn't deliberately avoid him or show any hostility toward him. Laura glanced at Tony with a wary expression. She wanted the princess to stand in front of her, but the lava demons in front of her looked even more ferocious. After some consideration, she decided not to say anything. Abraham, who was standing in the other line, wasn't worried at all. He also really liked the atmosphere of Chaos City, and Mamie's atmosphere was like a miniature version of Chaos City. Furthermore, it was an atmosphere that had been optimized by the rules of Chaos City. People gathered here because of delicious food, and because they cherished delicious food, they set aside their prejudices and truly accepted each other, interacting with one another in an equal manner. An opportunity like this would never appear in Rodu. With his and Vanessa's status, no one would be able to converse with them on an equal footing. He could tell that Vanessa also liked this kind of life, so in the letter he sent back to the king the day before, he promised that he would send Vanessa back to Chaos City in person after a month. "Mister, you don't seem to be from Chaos City, right? Where did you come from? Did you also come here for Mamie's?" Vanessa asked as she looked at Tony with a curious expression. After coming to Chaos City, her thirst for knowledge that had been repressed for several years was gradually being released. She was also very curious about other people's stories. Every time she lined up, she would find an opportunity to chat with other customers. The stories and experiences that she heard from these people were very different from the stories written by the literati that she read in books. Some of them were ordinary, some of them were exciting, but they were often more realistic and full of the atmosphere of the marketplace. "I'm to dash." Tony adjusted his clothes, but his words were stuck in his throat as soon as he opened his mouth. He liked to introduce himself, and then see the surprise, elation, and luck on the faces of others after hearing his name. But now, he was someone who had come out to avoid the limelight. He couldn't be recognized. Who knew how many of his fans were in this long line? Who knew if someone would hand him a knife on the spot? Hired someone. Vanessa looked at Tony in confusion. "Did Mr. Mack hire someone else too?" "Yes, I'm Thomas. I just came to Chaos City from the Demon Islands. I heard that this restaurant is pretty good, so I came to try it. However, I didn't come here specifically for it." He had no choice but to make up a name for himself. After that, he didn't forget to add, "There's only one restaurant in this world that I would go to specially for him. However, it's not in Chaos City. It's on Carapace Island in the Demon Islands." "Are you talking about IE Crayfish Restaurant on Carapace Island?" Vanessa asked with a smile. "Yes." "How did you know?" Tony jumped half a step back and stared at Vanessa. Did this maiden already recognize him? Vanessa smiled and said, "I just read Teacher Tony's article on Eat the World magazine yesterday. It mentioned IE Crayfish Restaurant on Carapace Island. The spicy crayfish, garlic crayfish, and 13 spice crayfish made me hungry in the middle of the night." He said what you just said in the article. There's only one restaurant in this world that he would go to specially for, and it's on Carapace Island in the Demon Islands. "I see." Tony heaved a sigh of relief. So, this maiden had read his article. He couldn't help but smile smugly. As a food critic, his favorite compliment was of course words that made people hungry. This was probably the same sense of accomplishment as when a chef's food was praised. "I heard that many people are already on their way. If it's not good, they're prepared to team up and kill Teacher Tony," Vanessa said with a nod. "Are the readers so cruel these days?" Tony stared and suddenly panicked. Don't the magazine have readers' comments every issue? There seemed to be quite a number of gourmets who were killed because of their recommendations. Moreover, I heard that there was once a gourmet who went on an offline date with a beautiful fan. In the end, the other party turned out to be a crossdresser. After that, that gourmet went silent for a period of time. When he appeared again, his style of writing became gay. Vanessa nodded. She was like a different person when it came to gossip about the food industry. "I'm scared." Tony's face was filled with fear. Was it that dangerous to write a food review article? However, I really like Teacher Tony's article about seafood. I feel that he's indeed the gourmet who knows seafood the best in this world. However, I don't agree with what he said. If there's a restaurant in this world that's worth you packing your bags and going to specially for, it would definitely be Mamie's, Vanessa said with certainty. How is that possible? Teacher Tony must be right. How can there be anything more delicious than the crayfish from IE Crayfish restaurant in this world? Tony was unconvinced. Although this lady was his hardcore fan, he would never give in when it came to matters of principle. Looks like you're also a fan of Teacher Tony. Vanessa looked at Tony in surprise and continued, I feel that Teacher Tony is good in everything, but the biggest problem is that he has too much prejudice against other dishes. Moreover, he's always staying in the Demon Islands and isn't willing to go to other places to look. There are still some limitations in his vision. If he can come to Mamie's and personally taste Mr. Mac's cooking, I believe that he'll definitely take back what he said before. Moreover, Mr. Mac has also recently introduced braised crayfish. It's also surprisingly delicious. I don't think it's worse than the crayfish from IE Crayfish restaurant. Impossible. How can there be any crayfish in this world that's comparable to the crayfish from IE Crayfish restaurant? That's already the pinnacle of crayfish. It's the pinnacle of crayfish that can't be surpassed. Tony waved his hand in disbelief. At the same time, he lamented in his heart, it might also be the last. Looks like we can't reach a consensus. Then we can only discuss it after we eat the crayfish, Vanessa said after thinking for a while. Let's eat then. Teacher Tony's judgment definitely won't be wrong. He's the person who knows seafood the best in this world. Tony smiled contemptuously. An inland city that couldn't even eat fresh seafood actually dared to say that it could make crayfish that was as delicious as the ones from IE Crayfish restaurant. Although Boss Hades ran away, the glory of IE Crayfish restaurant would be defended by him. How could someone who hadn't eaten fresh seafood at the seaside have the right to say such words? Chapter 14:14. Today's new product announcement, a strange fruit with a mysterious fragrance. What kind of deliciousness will blossom in my hands? Please look forward to today's new product, durian pizza. Limited to 100 servings for today's release. The notice hanging on the restaurant's door had been read countless times by the customers passing by. Every time it was read, it strengthened the customers' memories. Limited. This was a very important keyword because it often meant that it was a best-selling product and not easy to eat. Just like the tofu pudding that was released to 400 servings, if one queued up late, they might not be able to eat it. A limited product appeared again, and it was actually limited as soon as it was released. Other than the tofu pudding and Buddha jumps over the wall, this was very rare in Mamie's. Many people were already guessing what the mysterious fruit was. With Mr. Mac's usual cold and aloof style, such a new product announcement was also very rare. The customers' curiosity was piqued by many doubts, and they started to have endless thoughts about the so-called durian pizza. The new product is actually limited to 100 servings. There's no need to look, it won't be our turn to eat it. Vanessa sighed dejectedly as she listened to the discussions of the customers in front of her. She suddenly regretted going out to play this afternoon. She even missed the time to queue up. Was there anything more important in this world than eating? Isn't it just a new product? Why is everyone so excited? Tony was a little puzzled. Vanessa turned to look at Tony and said seriously, because every time Mr. Mac releases a new product, it means that there's another delicious food in the world. Isn't this a very important thing? If that's the case, then it is indeed a very important thing. Tony also nodded solemnly. As a gourmet, if what this young lady said was true, then this was indeed a very important thing. Boss, will the customers be unable to accept the smell of the durian? Mia asked worriedly as she looked at Meg, who was putting on an apron. Although the durian pizza was extremely delicious, if it was the first time someone smelled the durian, they might feel a little uncomfortable. It's okay, we just have to sell it. Once it's on the table, they have to eat it. As long as they move their mouths, then they lose. The corners of Meg's mouth curled up slightly. Judging from the expressions of the guests, the proposal he had written was beginning to take effect. If they taste it themselves, they will definitely fall in love with the taste. Mia nodded in agreement. The durian pizza had a magical charm that made people reluctant to part with it after eating it. All right, get ready. We're about to open for business. Meg straightened his chef's uniform and strode toward the entrance of the restaurant. He pushed the door open and smiled at the customers lining up outside. Welcome to Mamie's. Mr. Mack, there are more and more people here, Crassus said with a smile as he walked in. Thank you for liking it. Meg also responded with a smile. He didn't know where so many customers came from, and this was after the restaurant's high price. Mr. Mack, what's this durian pizza today? Meat dishes? Vegetarian dishes? Or is it dessert? Harrison asked curiously as he walked in. Many customers who were about to enter also looked at Meg curiously. After being brainwashed by the mysterious new product for an hour, their minds were now filled with the durian pizza. There are pictures on the menu. You'll see when you take a seat, Meg said with a smile. He didn't reveal it directly. Hearing that, everyone quickly took their seats. Then, they eagerly flipped open the menu on the table and found today's new product under desserts, the durian pizza. The round pizza was cut into 6 triangular pieces. There were a little bit of burnt yellow in the golden color. The bright color looked very attractive and coveted. However, the price of this durian pizza wasn't so friendly. 6-inch durian pizza, 500 copper coins, 12-inch durian pizza, 1,000 copper coins. This price made some customers who wanted to try the new product flinch. After all, it looked like a dessert. 500 copper coins could buy a set of tofu pudding and rugiamo. However, this didn't stop most customers from ordering. I'd like a 12-inch durian pizza, Harrison said to Yabamiya, who came to his side. A 12-inch pizza is enough for 2 to 3 people. Are you sure you want to order a 12-inch durian pizza? Mia looked at Harrison. George wasn't with him today. Harrison thought for a while, and said, in that case, I think I should add a beggar's chicken. Otherwise, I won't be full. Okay, please wait a moment. Mia nodded and walked to the next table. Father, look, the one behind Sister Windsor. Doesn't he look like the uncle who often came to the restaurant when we were on the island? Amy ran around the entrance of the restaurant, and then ran back to Meg, who was still standing at the entrance. She asked him to bend down and whispered in his ear. Oh. Meg straightened up when he heard that. He looked at the back of the line, and his eyes lit up when he saw Tony. Hee hee, so it's that gourmet bro. Did he go out to seek refuge? Meg even bought a gourmet magazine when he came back, and read Tony's gourmet reviews in it. To be fair, Tony's reviews were not bad. There was some substance to them, and he deserved to be popular. He was different from a food blogger like him, who relied on his face to make a living. Of course, not everyone could rely on their face like him. However, why did this gourmet, who claimed that he would die on the Demon Islands, and would never leave the seafood sanctuary, and would die if he didn't eat seafood for a day, come to Chaos City? Meg turned and walked in. He told Yabamiya to ask the customer behind Vanessa to sit outside the restaurant. Then, he told Jane that she could work in the restaurant during the opening hours, and she didn't have to go out. The family of 3 didn't have to worry about being exposed. After all, they had disguised themselves back then. If they took off a pair of pincers and pulled off a beard, who would be able to tell that they were? Who would know that he was Hades? Amy had changed her clothes, so it shouldn't be easy to tell. As for Irina, she wasn't even in the restaurant now. She should have gone to train the night elves. Those elves who had been imprisoned and enslaved didn't cultivate properly at all. She needed to teach them how to cultivate and how to fight. Hence, Jane became the only possible breakthrough point that could be recognized. Of course, Meg wasn't too worried that Tony would recognize them. He had already thought of many reasons for Jane. If they really couldn't be reasoned with, then they could only silence him. Meg was still more merciful to his peers. Of course, his peers were chefs now. Chapter 14-15. Before long, the durian pizza orders had exceeded 30 orders. Meg nodded in satisfaction and officially started to make the durian pizza. Due to the unique smell of the durian pizza, Mia adjusted the seats of the customers to ensure that the customers who did not order the durian pizza would not be affected. Although the probability of stepping on a landmine at Amy's was very low, many customers still had a scrutinizing attitude towards new products. It was obviously a better choice to let others try it first and see the evaluation before deciding whether to order it or not. "Luna, are you okay?" Vivian looked at Luna, who was sitting beside her with a pale face, and asked worriedly, "Does your stomach still hurt?" "I'm fine." Luna shook her head and pressed her lower abdomen with her hand. There were some fine beads of sweat on her forehead and her lips were a little blue from biting them. There were no classes in the afternoon, so Luna and Vivian agreed to go shopping and eat. However, her lower abdomen began to hurt from the moment she started to line up. It was so painful that she could not stand. When she sat down in the restaurant, the pain was still a little unbearable. It seemed that her period had come 2 days earlier this month. Ever since her first period came when she was 14 years old, she would feel cold and painful. This situation had continued until now. Those few days of every month were the most painful for her. Therefore, whenever her period came, she would take a leave of absence and lie at home, hugging a hot water bottle and lying like a corpse for an entire day. After enduring the most painful 2 days, she would come back to life and teach the students. "Why don't we go back first? Your situation doesn't seem too good." Vivian wiped Luna's cold sweat with a handkerchief. When she felt that her hand and forehead were cold, her expression became a little nervous. She knew about Luna's situation, but she did not say anything when she was lining up. When she sat down, she could not help but show it. Seeing her like this, how could she bear to see her like this? She wanted to quickly send her home to lie down. "No, didn't you just order a durian pizza? It's Mr. Meg's new product. You like it every time. It's a pity to leave now." Luna shook her head and forced a smile. "I'm fine. I'll be fine in a while." "You." Vivian was a little exasperated at the sight of Luna's stubborn expression. She hurriedly gestured for Mia to come over as she pleaded, "Big sister Mia, can you give me a cup of hot water? Luna isn't feeling too well." "Okay, please wait a moment." Mia looked at Luna, who didn't look too good. She quickly nodded and turned to the kitchen. Soon, she came out with a cup of warm water and gently placed it in front of Luna. "Thank you." Luna thanked him and reached out to hold the cup. The heat from the quilt dispelled the chill a lot, and the pain also eased a little. "Are you feeling better?" Vivian asked nervously. I'm fine. It's been so many years, and I'm already used to it. It's not like you don't know." Vivian glared at her with self-reproach, and said, "I'm just worried because I know. You've always been in so much pain. If I knew you were coming today, I definitely wouldn't have asked you to come out. I'll go back and get some sleep. I'll be fine tomorrow," Luna said with a gentle smile. Vivian looked at Luna with heartache, but there was nothing she could do. Even the doctors couldn't do anything about her condition. They all said that it was due to her constitution, and that she would be fine after enduring those 2 days every month. However, there was no good way to treat her condition. They could only eat something and send Luna home early to rest. Amy came over to greet Luna and Vivian before running off to play with Ugly Duckling. Teacher Luna doesn't seem to be feeling too well, Mia said casually as she went into the kitchen to bring out the dishes. Meg turned to look into the restaurant upon hearing that, and his gaze landed on Luna, who was holding a cup with one hand and pressing her lower abdomen with the other. Her face was slightly pale, and she did seem to be feeling unwell. Meg casually clicked on Luna's information that he had skipped before, and then saw in her status bar, signs of red buff continuous loss of health points. Meg pondered for a moment before asking, did Teacher Luna and the others order pizza? Yes, a 12-inch pizza. Mia nodded. Ding. Just then, the oven's notification sounded. Serve the other guests pizzas according to the usual order. Give this to Teacher Luna and the others first. Meg took out the durian pizzas from the oven one by one, and baked 8 12-inch durian pizzas at once. All right. Mia nodded, covered the durian pizzas, and carried them out, placing them in front of the guests one by one. The 8th pizza was directly brought to Luna's table. 12-inch durian pizza, please enjoy. Mia smiled, and then reached out to lift the lid of the durian pizza. A gust of hot air carrying the rich aroma of durian and cream instantly spread in the enclosed space. This smell. Vivian and Luna, like all the other guests who received the durian pizzas, covered their noses at the same time at the strange smell. The guests at the table next to them were even more exaggerated. They suddenly leaned back and flipped over with their chairs, lying on the ground with a look of horror and confusion on their faces. Many of the guests directly jumped up from their chairs, backed out of the dining area, and then gasped for air. Is it that exaggerated? Is it as smelly as stinky tofu? 1,000 copper coins for something that can't be eaten. The other guests looked at this scene curiously. They were surprised, and some were gloating, and some were thinking about the wisdom of not ordering the food. This smell is too strong, isn't it? It's a little overpowering. Although Harrison was still sitting in the chair, he didn't look too good. He couldn't tell what the smell was. It didn't smell bad, but it didn't smell good. He couldn't quite accept the smell. Anyway, it felt a little awkward. Although Vivian was still sitting, she could not help but mumble as she looked at the durian pizza in front of her. This. Could it be that Mr. Mac also has times when he makes mistakes? Luna put down her hand at some point, and sniffed lightly. Her eyes lit up, and she said, I think it's all right. It's just baked to a golden color, and it looks very appetizing. Also, if you smell it carefully, it's actually a very special aroma. It's mixed with the aroma of cream, so it should be very delicious. Really? Vivian let go of the hand that was covering her nose skeptically, and tried to sniff it. After what Luna said, the smell was indeed not as bad as before, but she still did not want to try this pizza with such a strange smell. I didn't want to eat at first, but after smelling this aroma, I'm a little hungry. Let me try it first. Luna saw that Vivian was a little disgusted, and reached out with a smile to pinch a triangular piece of pizza. She lifted it up, and pulled out a long strand. From the cut surface, she could see that the yellow durian meat took up more than half of the thickness. The aroma together with the heat wafted over, and made her forget the pain for a moment. Eat it, Luna said to Vivian, and then took a bite of the pizza. Chapter 14-16. Softness and tenacity blossomed between her teeth. The sweet durian meat almost melted in her mouth. That amazing taste made her taste buds flustered as if they had been attacked. The aroma was so rich and mellow that she couldn't help but be immersed in it, wanting to greedily claim that wonderful taste. Meanwhile, the bread was baked with a burnt aroma, and the aroma of the cream was irresistible. After taking a full bite, she was instantly filled with satisfaction. Luna covered her mouth subconsciously to prevent herself from making any strange sounds. She looked up at Vivian and said, "This pizza is so delicious." "Really?" Vivian was a little skeptical, but Luna never lied. Luna nodded. What surprised her even more was that after swallowing the pizza, it turned into a warm current that slowly descended in her body, then continued to release heat in her stomach. It was as if a flame had been ignited in her cold body, and the pain in her lower abdomen was immediately alleviated. It became less unbearable. What a strange effect. It can even alleviate my pain. Luna's eyes lit up, and she took another bite of the pizza. The delicious taste bloomed on the tip of her tongue, and after swallowing, it converged into a warm current that warmed her body. Bite after bite, the pain was quickly disappearing. The delicious taste had already overshadowed the pain, and she didn't think about anything else as she immersed herself in the delicious taste. "She's eating too much, isn't she?" Vivian looked at Luna, who couldn't stop eating, and couldn't help but pick up a piece of pizza. She took a deep breath and then took a bite. This taste. Vivian's eyes lit up instantly. The sweet and mellow durian meat melted on the tip of her tongue without any reason. The rich aroma was almost omnipresent in her mouth, and together with that wonderful taste, it crazily attacked her taste buds. It had a completely different feeling from the tofu pudding, but there were some similarities in the texture. However, compared to the soft tofu pudding, this durian meat was more aggressive. That rich aroma was like a king that attacked crazily until you bowed down to him. Vivian knew that she had lost, and it was a crushing defeat. Her insistence was powerless in the face of Durian's attack. His taste buds had already been conquered, and at that moment, his sense of smell seemed to have been modified. The originally strange fragrance instantly became wonderful, and when paired with the taste, it was even more irresistible. The most satisfying part was probably the thick layer of durian. It was not just a little seasoning. Here, it was the real main character. The pizza on the bottom layer had the best quality of green leaves. It had a slightly crispy crust that was soft but not malleable. It was full of a milky aroma, which perfectly wiped away the trace of greasy taste brought by eating too much durian. "It's so delicious, but it's hidden so deeply. How naughty," Vivian muttered. She couldn't help but continue to eat the pizza, immersing herself in the happiness brought by the durian pizza. Seeing the two beautiful ladies, Vivian and Luna, eating so happily, the customers who were debating whether they should return the food hesitated for a moment before returning to their seats. "Take good care of my seventh uncle." Harrison picked up a slice of pizza and bit off half of it. "Fuck." A mouthful of durian made him lose his mind instantly. His mind was completely blank, and only the word fuck could express his inner feelings at this moment. Compared to that strange taste, the taste of this durian pizza was much easier to accept. No, it should be said that it was much easier to be conquered by it. There were many kinds of delicacies at Amy's, but the deliciousness of the durian pizza was unique and irresistible. "Brother, is this pizza really delicious?" The young demon at the same table asked as he looked at Harrison, who was eating a slice of pizza in a few bites. "Delicious." This word isn't strong enough. It should be extremely delicious. Durian pizza, fucking delicious. Harrison gave a thumbs up, almost waving the flag and shouting. No matter, from today onwards, he was the #1 follower of durian pizza. Harrison's slightly exaggerated eating manners and heartfelt praise made the customers who were still hesitating start to try it. He was a regular in the restaurant, and many people saw him often. There was no need to lie. "Isn't this durian pizza too delicious? Is this made with tofu pudding?" How can the taste be so wonderful? Soon, praises for the durian pizza could be heard everywhere in the restaurant. After tasting it for themselves, everyone's first impression of the durian pizza was overturned. They became immersed in it and willingly became its captives. Ah, the taste was irresistible. The huge contrast between the taste of the durian pizza before and after the customers tasted it also spurred the customers who were still hesitating to order the pizza. However, there were also some customers who were defeated by the strange taste and chose food that was more acceptable. Meg looked at the durian pizza orders, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. It was a very good start. Perhaps he could complete 100 orders tonight. Although today's announcement was a bit deceptive, there was no such thing as too much deception in war. Everyone wanted to step into the delicious trap. As expected of Mr. Mac. He never disappoints. Vivian licked her fingers, covered her mouth, and burped. The satisfaction of eating half a durian pizza was overflowing on her face. She was really too happy. I'm so full too. Luna touched her slightly bulging stomach with some guilt. Suddenly, she was stunned. What's wrong? Does it still hurt? Vivian also suddenly remembered that Luna had a stomachache just now. She was too engrossed in eating and forgot about it. No, it doesn't hurt now. After eating this durian pizza, it suddenly doesn't hurt anymore. Luna shook her head with a look of surprise. Really? Vivian grabbed Luna's hand in surprise. Her cold hand had become very warm now. Her eyes lit up. Really, even your hand has become warm. I didn't expect this durian pizza to have such a magical effect. Yes, this is the first time this has happened. Rena nodded. This was an illness that had been bothering her for years, and she didn't expect it to be suppressed by half a durian pizza. Mr. Mac is really a strange doctor and a god of cooking. Should we give him a plaque that says gynecology sage? Vivian whispered in Luna's ear. Don't. Then I won't know how to face Mr. Meg in the future. Luna glared at Vivian with some reproach. Okay. After all, our teacher Luna still has to maintain the elegant demeanor of a teacher in front of Mr. Mac. Vivian nodded with a smile and said, how about this? Let's eat durian pizza again tomorrow for 3 days and see how it goes. Chapter 14-17. How long do we have to wait before we can eat? Tony wasn't hungry at first, but as he waited, he started to feel hungry. The line was moving forward slowly, but the speed was too slow. They had been waiting for almost 2 hours, but it was still far from their turn. If they were on the Demon Islands, they wouldn't have to wait in line when they heard that he was coming. They would welcome him in like a boss. This was the first time they had to wait in line for such a long time. I've counted the number of people. It will be our turn in about half an hour. It's a pity that we only have half an hour to eat. We probably won't be able to eat hot pot today. The new dish is definitely gone. Vanessa stood on her tiptoes and looked forward. She was still in high spirits, as if she didn't feel that waiting in line was tiring at all. She just felt that it was a pity that she wouldn't be able to eat hot pot and the new dish. Abraham's head was drooping, and he was already drowsy. He was following the line slowly and unconsciously. Half an hour. Tony's eyes widened, but when he saw the customers lining up calmly, even the irascible demons were lining up obediently, he resisted the urge to complain. He thought to himself, I'd like to see what kind of magic this restaurant has to be able to make so many customers line up here willingly. And that crayfish, how can there be any crayfish in this world that can be compared to the crayfish from IE Crayfish Restaurant? After about half an hour, they finally reached the end of the line. Yabamiya glanced at Vanessa and the others, as well as the demon uncle behind them. She walked out of the door with a smile and guided them to their seats outside the restaurant. There are no seats in the restaurant at the moment. The designated hot pot area has also stopped accepting new customers. Dear customers, please eat here and take a look at the menu. Big Sister Mia, are there any more of the new dish that was released today? Vanessa asked expectantly as soon as she sat down. The 100 pieces of durian pizza have all been sold. If you want to eat it, you can come over earlier tomorrow. Yabamiya shook her head slightly. Is there no more tofu pudding? Yes, the tofu pudding is also sold out. Yabamiya nodded. Sure enough, you can be late for anything, but you definitely can't be late for a meal at Mamie's. Vanessa lamented, feeling as if she had missed out on a priceless treasure. Tony and Vanessa shared a table. Although it was a little strange for them to dine outside the restaurant since this restaurant was so beautiful, there were many open-air restaurants on the Demon Islands. Hence, they didn't think too much about it. They picked up the menu and flipped it open. Their eyes lit up when they saw the pictures of the dishes on the menu. Every dish was accompanied by a picture, and the pictures looked like they were recorded with a photo stone. They looked very real and didn't look like they were drawn. Just looking at the pictures made one feel very hungry. What surprised him was the prices of the dishes. He scanned the dishes from top to bottom. The cheapest dish was 100 copper coins per bowl of soy milk, while the most expensive dish, Buddha jumps over the wall soup, cost 10,000 copper coins per unit. 10,000 copper coins. Tony's eyes widened, and he looked at the price incredulously. The prices of the dishes in this restaurant were so expensive. He had been on the Demon Islands for many years, and he had never seen such an exaggerated menu. This is a scam, right? I can get a delicious spicy crayfish at the Demon Islands with 100 copper coins, but I can only get a bowl of white soy milk here, Tony muttered to himself. He wasn't actually short of money. As a gourmet who was paid handsomely, even if he ordered all the dishes on the menu, he would only feel a little heartache. Then, his gaze landed on the braised crayfish. His eyes lit up when he saw the bright red crayfish with big pincers in the picture. He said in surprise, "Isn't this the same crayfish from IE restaurant?" Then, his gaze landed on the price. Fuck. Braised crayfish, 1,000 copper coins per crayfish. It was 10 times more expensive. Uncle, how is it? Isn't Mr. Max selling his crayfish very conscientious? Vanessa smiled at Tony, who was staring at the crayfish. Conscientious. Ha. The crayfish on Carapace Island are 10 times cheaper than this. Tony rolled his eyes. But this is Chaos City. There's no sea, so it's super difficult to get fresh seafood. You can probably only get it at Mamie's, Vanessa said with a smile. Seafood will die very quickly once it leaves the sea. Hence, it's impossible for fresh seafood to appear in Chaos City. I think it's a little expensive to sell a dead crayfish for 1,000 copper coins. After all, AE Crayfish Restaurant's crayfish is only 100 copper coins per crayfish, and it's the best delicacy. Tony shook his head, and disagreed with Vanessa. Not necessarily. I've tried the freshest seafood, but I don't think it's more delicious than Mr. Max crayfish. In terms of taste, it can't be compared at all. I think the price of 1,000 copper coins is totally worth it. Furthermore, I think Mr. Max braised crayfish won't taste worse than the crayfish that Teacher Tony recommends. Vanessa insisted. Then, she looked at Yabamiya and said, "Big Sister Mia, I want a crayfish, and then a huge helping of insanely spicy grilled fish. Then, I'll try this crayfish too." Tony was a little indignant. He also ordered a braised crayfish. When he saw beer in the beer section, he also ordered a cold beer. He wanted to see if the quality of this restaurant's beer could reach the standard of IE Crayfish Restaurant. Abraham, who was still leisurely thinking about what to eat for dinner, sat up straight when he heard Vanessa's words. He looked at her with a bitter expression and said, "Insanely spicy again. Little ancestor, let's discuss this properly. We just had the insanely spicy hot pot yesterday. Even if we have the super spicy hot pot today, we can still accept it. But insanely spicy is the best. It's so spicy that your tongue is tied up. Isn't that super interesting?" Vanessa looked at Abraham innocently. "I don't think it's interesting at all. I just feel like my butt doesn't belong to me anymore." Abraham looked at the sky. He suddenly missed Vanessa, who was still working hard to fix her teeth. How nice it would be to be bland. Insanely spicy was not something a middle-aged man like him should be able to handle. Insanely spicy. Tony was a little curious. What kind of flavor was this? "Uncle, you can eat with us later. This is Mr. Mac's original flavor. I heard that real men eat insanely spicy. Do you want to try it?" Vanessa asked with a smile. Then she added, "Most people don't dare to try it. Hee, it's just a little spicy." "Easy," Tony said with a relaxed expression. What a joke. Was there any food in this world that could scare him? No way. Chapter 14:18. There seemed to be some kind of magic barrier that prevented the cold wind from blowing in. Instead, it was very warm and comfortable. Tony nestled in his chair comfortably. It was not completely unreasonable to say that it was expensive. Although there were guests of different races around, it wasn't noisy at all. Even the demons and dwarves at the side were whispering to each other in hushed voices. Sitting in such a place to eat made one's spirit relax. Such a scene could not be seen in other restaurants. "Hello, here are your braised crayfish." Not long after, Yebamiya walked out with a tray, and placed the crayfish in front of everyone one by one. "Smells so good." Tony sat up straight in his chair, and stared at the red crayfish on the big black plate. "Isn't this the spicy crayfish?" The crayfish with its big pincers looked exactly the same as the crayfish he had at IE Crayfish Restaurant. Be it the size or the appearance, there was almost no difference. Tony suppressed the difference in his heart, and sniffed seriously. There was indeed a difference in the aroma. The garlic crayfish was full of garlic, the spicy crayfish was spicy and fresh, and the 13-spice crayfish was rich and fragrant. However, this so-called braised crayfish had a more restrained taste. It was less spicy than the spicy crayfish, and less fragrant than the 13-spice crayfish. However, it was this half-concealed feeling that made one even more curious about what kind of taste was hidden in this crayfish. Strange. Could this boss have gone to Carapace Island to get ingredients? Or are these crayfish produced in other places too? Tony was a little puzzled. He had stayed on the Demon Islands for so many years, and had never eaten crayfish that looked like this before IE Crayfish Restaurant. He didn't expect to see it again after coming to Chaos City. Today's crayfish still smells so good. "I'm going to dig in," Vanessa said with a smile. She had already grabbed a pincer, and broke off the shell. Then, she took a bite of the plump pincer and indulged in the scrumptious taste. "Seems like the way they are eaten is similar." Tony was deep in thought. He retracted his gaze from Vanessa, and looked at the prawns in front of him. He thought to himself, although they look about the same, appearance alone is useless. This prawn is definitely not fresh, and the taste is definitely not on the same level as Boss Hades's. With the mentality of trying it casually and then preparing to release a wave of ridicule after eating, Tony reached out and broke off the prawn's head. This fragrance. A rich fragrance gushed out along with the steam, and the restrained fragrance suddenly bloomed. Tony's eyes couldn't help but light up. It was an unexpected fragrance. Then he picked up the prawn head, put it to his mouth and took a bite. Oh, this damned delicacy. How can this shrimp butter be so delicious and sweet? Tony revealed a shocked expression as he looked at the prawn head in his hand in disbelief. The prawn butter melted in his mouth without the slightest fishy taste. There was a hint of spiciness amidst the sweetness, and the restrained fragrance was perfectly displayed in this mouthful of prawn butter. Fresh. This was the most intuitive embodiment. As a gourmet who claimed to know seafood the best, he clearly knew that this was definitely cooked with fresh crayfish. It could even wave its pincers a second before it was put into the pot. Other than that, the delicacy made him gasp in amazement. It was different from the garlic fragrance of the garlic crayfish, the spicy and fresh fragrance of the spicy crayfish, and the rich and intoxicating feeling of the 13-spice crayfish. This braised crayfish gave him a different feeling. The delicacy of the spices and crayfish was stewed into the crayfish, and only by opening the hard shell could one enjoy the delicacy. It was a pleasant surprise. How can it be so delicious? Although there are some differences in the taste and cooking method, it doesn't lose to the crayfish made by Boss Hades at all. Tony's mind was completely blank, and the thought of eating it had been completely thrown to the back of his mind. After eating the prawn butter and the prawn head, Tony broke off a pincer and took a bite of the prawn meat. The springy prawn meat had the freshness that belonged to the ocean, and it confirmed his judgment that this was the freshest prawn. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was just fished out from the sea. The fresh and sweet prawn meat was soaked in the gravy, and the freshness was completely stimulated. It was completely different from its dry appearance. When he bit into it, the juices were overflowing, and it was very fresh and fragrant. Love. There was only one thought left in Tony's mind. He was addicted to the satisfaction of eating the prawn meat bite after bite. After eating the 2 pincers, he had a mouthful of foamy beer. This feeling was great. Uncle, how is it? Isn't the crayfish made by Mr. Mac super delicious? Isn't the prawn super fresh? Vanessa asked Tony with a smile. This. Tony blushed. He had refuted Vanessa's words righteously just now, but after tasting the delicious crayfish with his own mouth, he couldn't say those words. I admit that this crayfish is indeed very delicious, and the prawn is unexpectedly fresh. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was just fished out from the sea. I take back what I said just now. Tony nodded. As a gourmet, he also had his own professional integrity. He couldn't say anything that went against his heart. Vanessa continued to ask, how does it compare to the IE crayfish restaurant on Carapace Island? After reading Teacher Tony's article, I'm quite interested in the 3 flavors of crayfish. If there's a chance, I'd like to try it. These are crayfish with completely different flavors. However, if you must compare them, the difference is probably the price. On Carapace Island, you can eat 10 crayfish of the same standard for the same price. Tony looked at Vanessa with an awkward expression, and said, however, I don't really recommend you to go to Carapace Island. After all, the Demon Islands are quite chaotic. Carapace Island is the real chaotic island, and it's not suitable for a beautiful young lady like you. He was afraid that this young lady would join the group that wanted to kill him. Moreover, Carapace Island was indeed very chaotic. If a beautiful young lady like her went there, anything could happen. Yes, yes, yes. Why would a young lady like you go to the Demon Islands? Is the tofu pudding not delicious, or is the spicy grilled fish not spicy enough? Abraham hurriedly chimed in. This little brat was already under a lot of pressure in Chaos City. If she were to go to the Demon Islands, the king would most likely tear him to shreds. Really? I don't think so. Before I came to Chaos City, I also heard that Chaos City was very chaotic. However, after I came here, I realized that this place is quite good. Maybe Carapace Island is also good, Vanessa said innocently. Young mistress, but there's no hot pot on Carapace Island, Laura reminded her softly. Then, I'm not going. Vanessa didn't even think about it. No pop-up window. Chapter 14:19. The crayfish was quickly finished by Tony, but he was still somewhat unsatisfied. However, the seafood that he ate in Chaos City gave him a huge surprise. After IE Crayfish Restaurant went missing for no reason, he was still lamenting that he might not be able to eat such delicious crayfish in his lifetime. He didn't expect that he would be able to eat the same delicious braised crayfish here after leaving the Demon Islands. To be fair, this was the king of the crayfish that was on par with the spicy crayfish, garlic crayfish, and 13-spice crayfish. If it weren't for the fact that he was currently on the run, he would definitely write a long article tonight and brag about it. Is your seafood so easy to get? Tony asked Vanessa curiously as he put down his empty beer glass. These crayfish were way too fresh, and there were so many customers who ordered it. Where did all these fresh crayfish come from? Also, is this beer a specialty here? This beer gave him a very familiar feeling. It was very similar to the beer in IE Crayfish Restaurant. He suddenly felt like he was back on Carapace Island when he was eating the crayfish and drinking the beer here. I don't know about the seafood, but it shouldn't be so easy to get. As for the beer, I don't drink, so I don't know if it's a specialty here. Is it good? Vanessa shook her head, and then looked at Tony's beer glass with curiosity. She was eager to try it. No, it's bitter. Children can't drink it, Abraham answered immediately. He definitely couldn't let Vanessa try drinking alcohol. Really? But I saw that everyone looked very happy when they were drinking it. Vanessa didn't believe him. Adults have thousands of different kinds of bitterness. In comparison, this bit of bitterness in beer is nothing. Drinking a little will make you feel better, Abraham said calmly. Beer is for adults. Children won't grow up if they drink it, Tony chimed in. All right. I'll just drink my fruit juice then. Vanessa nodded. She looked at the beer with a sly look in her eyes. You're insanely spicy grilled fish. Yabamiya cleared everyone's plates, and quickly served a huge grilled fish in the middle of the table. What is this? Why is it so dazzling? Tony leaned back with tears in his eyes after being hit by the hot air. The tingling sensation made him feel that his tears were no longer under his control. Abraham had already moved his chair back a little, and he was staring at the spicy grilled fish with an expression as if he had seen a ghost. He felt as if something deep within his soul was trembling uncontrollably. Was his fragile anus going to be ravaged again? In contrast, Vanessa was elated as she took a deep sniff of the fish, and an elated smile appeared on her face as she said to Tony, "So this is the insanely spicy grilled fish. It's super delicious, and this fish is so big, you should eat it as well, Uncle." Tony tried to alleviate the irritation in his eyes as he looked at the grilled fish that was covered in red chili. He hadn't even eaten it yet, but he could already feel his throat burning. Was this how people in Chaos City ate chili? Even the spicy crayfish that he found spicy previously paled in comparison to this. This was indeed his first time encountering a dish that was so spicy to his eyes just from the taste alone. Don't tell me you don't dare to eat it. Vanessa blinked. How could I not dare to eat it? This level of spiciness is nothing to demons like us. Tony chuckled with disdain. Wow, that sounds awesome. Vanessa's eyes lit up. Hee hee. Tony forced a smile onto his face, but he was already feeling very bitter inside. How could he brag so casually? Then let's dig in. It's the best when it's just grilled. Vanessa had already picked up her chopsticks eagerly, and put a piece of fish into her mouth. Her cheeks flushed a little, but her expression was quite joyful as she enjoyed the feeling of her taste buds being defenseless in the face of the insanely spicy grilled fish. Could it be that it doesn't taste as spicy as it smells? Even a little girl like her doesn't have any reaction after eating it, so it shouldn't be a problem, right? Tony thought to himself. He didn't want to be looked down upon by a little girl. He picked up his chopsticks and peeled off the chili before picking up a piece of fish. After thinking for a while, he dipped it in the gravy before putting it into his mouth. There didn't seem to be anything special in the first instant when the fish entered his mouth. Under the crispy fish skin was fresh and tender. It was very rare to be able to eat such perfectly grilled fish on the Demon Islands. However, the calmness was completely broken the moment the gravy touched his taste buds. Spiciness? No. It was pain. It was as if someone had pulled his tongue out of his mouth, and then a dwarf blacksmith had swung his heavy hammer and smashed it heavily on his tongue. His delicate tongue and those sensitive taste buds were smashed by this hammer, and he almost forgot who his mother was. His face turned red in an instant. It wasn't just a slight redness, it was as red as a tomato, and steam was rising from his head. He felt as if all the cells in his body were boiling, as if countless violent factors were running amok in his body. After the momentary pain, the spiciness officially made its appearance. This wasn't an ordinary spiciness, this kind of spiciness was really perverted. It was as if a mage had thrown a ball of flame on his tongue and poured a mouthful of hot oil into his mouth. The flames were raging in his mouth and spreading down his throat. Tony felt that he had to spit out this mouthful of fish. Otherwise, he might be burned to death on the spot. As for his pride, fuck his pride. Uncle, does it taste good? Vanessa suddenly asked. This. Tony opened his mouth, and the fish slid down his throat. His neck was visibly turning red as it slid down into his stomach. Tony was stunned for a moment before grabbing Abraham's beer and taking 2 big gulps. He then chewed the 2 ice cubes at the bottom of the glass and swallowed them. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief. His clothes were completely drenched in the blink of an eye, and he felt as if he was in a daze. 2 more glasses of cold beer, please. Abraham looked at Tony sympathetically, and gestured to Mia with his hand. No. How can there be such a terrifying spiciness in this world? Also, how can this little girl eat it so sweetly and deliciously? This isn't something that a normal demon can accept. Tony looked at the astonished Vanessa, and felt as if his soul had been deceived. Blue, thin, mushroom. Chapter 14:20. Isn't it super delicious? Vanessa looked at Tony with a smile. It's all right. Tony felt as if his tongue had been tied up, and he couldn't even speak properly. Vanessa's eyes lit up, and she continued, then you have to eat more. My uncle and Laura can't eat much, and I usually eat most of the fish by myself. It's not very fun. Th, that's the spirit. Good luck. Vanessa picked up her chopsticks, and continued to indulge in the grilled fish. Same here. Abraham raised his glass to Tony, and there was a hint of sympathy in his eyes. Tony raised his glass, and didn't want to say anything. Instead, he gulped down a large mouthful of cold beer. Tony finished his dinner under the dual sanctions of pain and pleasure. However, to be honest, after getting over the initial agony of the insanely spicy taste, he gradually began to appreciate the deliciousness of the grilled fish. The crispy fish skin, the smooth and tender fish meat, and the side dishes that had been soaked in the gravy were all extremely exquisite and delicious. Tony had to admit that none of the grilled fish he had ever tasted could compare to this. If the insanely spicy level was replaced with the normal level of spiciness, he should be able to appreciate the deliciousness of the grilled fish in a more detailed manner. It looks like it's not unreasonable for this restaurant to be loved by so many customers and be praised by so many peers, Tony mused to himself. Regardless of whether it was the environment, the ambience, or the taste of the food, this was the best restaurant he had ever seen. "Bill, please," Abraham said. Anna walked out with a small box in her arms. Abraham smiled and said, "I'll pay for everything on this table." Anna pondered for a moment and said, "For braised crayfish, a large grilled fish, 6 glasses of cold beer, and 4 glasses of fruit juice. The total is 8,800 copper coins." Abraham fished out 8 dragon coins, and handed them to Anna, and said, "Keep the change." "Thank you." Anna nodded, and put away the dragon coins before making her way to the next customer. "Thank you for your generosity." Tony nodded at Abraham in greeting. As a middle-aged man who had been poisoned by the insanely spicy sauce together, he felt a sense of camaraderie. Although he was curious about the owner of this restaurant, Tony only wanted to return to the hotel to take a hot bath and change into comfortable clothes. Hence, he got up and bid farewell to Vanessa and the others. "Raina, is your mother feeling better?" After the dinner service, Meg took off his apron and hung it on the hanger. He looked at Raina, who was cleaning up the stove, and asked, "Well, after Princess Irina's treatment, my mother's illness has been completely cured, but she is still a little weak. After drinking the bone soup these days, she has been relieved very well." Raina nodded, looking at Meg with eyes full of gratitude. "That's good." Meg nodded with a smile and looked at Jane, who was helping by the side. "Jane, are you used to staying here?" Okay. Jane nodded profusely and smilingly said, "I like Amy's, Chaos City, and the customers here." "That's good." Meg was initially worried that Jane wouldn't be used to life in Chaos City, but it seemed that his worries were completely unnecessary. Meg turned to Anna, who was counting money with Amy, and asked, "Anna, which big sister are you going to sleep with tonight?" Anna looked back at all the big sisters who were looking at her with smiles, and hesitated a little. "Of course I'm going to sleep with little sister Amy." "I like to sleep with big sister Anna." Amy grabbed Anna's little hand, and happily said, Anna nodded with a smile. "All right, then you can sleep with Amy tonight." Meg also nodded with a smile. After Blower left, Anna had been living in the restaurant and the staff dormitory. She had slept with Yabamiya and the others for the past 2 days, but since Anna wanted to sleep with Amy, Meg naturally didn't have any objections. Meg turned to everyone with a smile and said, "Thank you for your hard work today. Tomorrow is a rest day, so you can all sleep in and have fun. Boss, we've only been open for 3 days after you came back. Won't the customers be unhappy if we rest right away?" Yabamiya was a little concerned. "This is our official rest day, so of course our happiness is more important." Meg shook his head with a smile. That was Mr. Mac's answer, and it didn't sound like there was anything wrong with it. Yabamiya nodded with a smile. All of the ladies bade farewell to one another, and Irina just so happened to be returning from outside. Her hair was a little disheveled, but she still looked as dignified and holy as ever. "What happened?" Meg locked the door, and went into the kitchen to get a glass of water as he looked at Irina, who seemed to have just been through a battle. Irina took a sip of warm water, and calmly replied, "I made a trip out of the city, and killed some scum. Those guys were quite brave. They dared to come all the way to Chaos City to hunt down wandering elves. It was as if she had just done something completely insignificant." "Were they scary demons?" Anna asked softly. She had been deeply hurt by demons before. Irina looked at Anna with a smile, and said, "They were demons, but they weren't scary at all. They were just a bunch of scum who only knew how to bully the weak. As long as you're strong enough, you can destroy them with a wave of your hand." Anna looked at Irina with her mouth slightly agape. She still couldn't imagine how she could kill those scary demons with a wave of her hand. I know how to do that. You just have to release a fireball before you wave your hand, and then throw the fireball at them. That way, those bad demons will be destroyed, Amy reminded her. I see. Anna was deep in thought. She had seen Amy release a fireball before, so she could imagine that scene immediately. Or you can catch Ugly Duckling, and then throw it out with a wave of your hand. That way, it can squash those bad demons with its weight. Amy looked at Ugly Duckling with a smile, and said, when you throw it out, you can even shout, I'm throwing you, Ugly Duckling. Meow, Ugly Duckling let out a bitter cry. Oh, I get it. Anna's eyes lit up, and her gaze landed on Ugly Duckling. She could even throw Ugly Duckling. Could she try it the next time she encountered a scary demon? Ugly Duckling felt the gazes on it, and slowly retreated to hide behind Meg's feet. It stuck half of its head out to look at Amy and Anna with an innocent expression, exuding sadness. Meg was also amused by Amy's analogy. He reached out to touch the two little ones' heads, and said, all right, go upstairs and wash up. It's time to get ready for bed. Children shouldn't stay up late. Amy and Anna nodded obediently. They held hands and skipped up the stairs. Ugly Duckling hesitated for a moment, but still chose to follow behind the two of them slowly. Then, Amy scooped it up. Ugly Duckling, you've already grown 2 little wings. Why can't you fly? Maybe I've eaten too much. I don't like it. I'm throwing you, Ugly Duckling. Ha, I caught it. I'm throwing you, Ugly Duckling. I caught it too. I'll throw it back to you. I caught it, smack, it fell on the ground. Chapter 14:21. Meg followed them upstairs, and smiled as he picked up Ugly Duckling, who was lying on the floor with a look of despair. The 2 little golden wings on the little fellow's back looked even more eye-catching. He wondered what kind of sand eagle this was, and if it could really grow a pair of wings and become a white swan. However, its body shape was developing in the direction of a Totoro. Meg filled the bathtub with hot water for the 2 little fellows, and put in a few yellow ducklings and an ugly duckling before leaving the bathroom. The 2 little fellows had already learned to bathe by themselves. Anna was a sensible big sister, and was very good at taking care of her little sister. Meg appeared from the bathroom, and Irina was standing at the door. He took 2 steps forward, and softly said, the time has been set. The elves will hold the conferring ceremony at noon tomorrow to officially confer Sally as the new elven princess, and execute the night elves caught during this period of time. Irina looked at Meg, and asked, what do you think? If I'm not wrong, this should be another conspiracy against you. The Wind Forest released the news of the execution of the night elves on purpose to tell all the elves and the whole world their attitude. Then, they will see if you, the savior and spiritual leader of the night elves, will appear at the conferring ceremony and save all the night elves as expected. Everyone knows that I will go. Then, this is a trap that has been perfected infinitely. As long as you go, there's a high chance that you won't be able to come back. After all, this is a trap set up with the power of an entire race. Irina was silent. Although Borg was dead, and the Elven Queen was still in seclusion, the elves were still a powerful race. If they set up a trap with the power of an entire race, it was almost impossible to save the night elves from them with just one person's ability. I still have to go. Irina looked at Meg with a calm gaze. A smile appeared on Meg's face. This was the answer that he expected, and also the answer that the whole world knew. You said that you threw a fire seed into the Wind Forest. Will it be able to burn a prairie fire tomorrow? Meg asked. You mean, igniting the fire seed? Irina's eyes narrowed slightly. No, the fire seed has already been ignited. What they need now is a gust of wind, a wind that can blow the fire seed into a raging inferno. Initiate an official battle between the night elves and the wind forest. It's still too early for the duel, but we can already fire the first shot in the wind forest. Meg shook his head. We are not strong enough, and if too many foreign forces are involved in the internal struggle of the elves, it may eventually develop in a direction that is beyond our expectations. However, the conferring ceremony this time had gathered the attention of all the elves. If the night elves did nothing, that spark would gradually extinguish due to disappointment. You and the night elves must show your attitude and lead the elves scattered throughout the forest to officially rebel. Let the flames of freedom light up the entire forest and provide cover for our actions during the ceremony. Irina frowned and said worriedly, the strength of the night elves is still too weak. The strength of the lower class elves is also much weaker than the ruling class. If we let them rebel now, it may increase the number of casualties. Bloodshed is always involved in battles. Also, don't underestimate the yearning for freedom of each class. Only when the battle erupts in the wind forest will elves of different classes gradually join the ranks of the elves fighting for freedom. This will make the night elves stronger through bloodshed. Meg shook his head and said with a smile, Shirley and Sally are typical examples. Although they were born into nobility, they have sympathy for the lower class elves and are willing to sacrifice themselves for the freedom of the entire elven race. I'm going out for a while. Irina seemed to be in deep thought. A green light flashed under her feet, and she disappeared. System, help me calculate. If the speed of the mobile restaurant is increased to the maximum, and then it hits the ground at the highest speed, what kind of energy will it produce? If it's converted to the magic attack level of this world, what level of damage will it cause? Meg asked in his mind. Wastrel. The mobile restaurant is such a high-class thing. Is it for you to use it like this? This is a high-tech existence that can be exchanged for an aircraft carrier. The system's angry roar sounded in Meg's mind. It's fine if it doesn't hit the ground. Then why don't you sell me a few missiles? I don't have high requirements. The kind that can achieve its goal will do. Meg raised his eyebrows. Using the mobile restaurant, which could change its size and fly extremely fast, as a missile was indeed a little distressing to him. Host, please take back your unreasonable request. Missiles shouldn't appear in this world. It will cause chaos in the power system, which will lead to a series of serious problems. Then help me calculate the problem just now. Anyway, if I'm going to die, it doesn't matter if the power system collapses or whatever. Can you make me do it again? No matter how good the mobile restaurant is, I need to be alive to use it. Meg pouted. The system was silent for a while, and a line of small words appeared in Meg's mind. The speed of the mobile restaurant is increased to Mach 5. When it hits the ground at full load, the shock wave caused by the impact and the explosion of the nuclear power device in the restaurant can cause a huge amount of damage equal to the combined attack of more than 10 magicians, and cause severe deterioration of the environment within a radius of 5 kilometers. Host, please use with caution. This is really a killer move. Meg's eyes lit up. However, this was an indiscriminate attack, which was equivalent to planting mushrooms. The damage was high, and the destruction was also strong. Unless it was a last resort, he really couldn't use it. Moreover, what troubled Meg the most was that although he had such a killer move, he couldn't use it to threaten others. Others wouldn't believe that he had such a killer move. It would be great if there were 2 mobile restaurants. Meg sighed. He would take one out and blow it up to let others know its power. That way, he would have more confidence in threatening others. Apart from the mobile restaurant, Meg could only think of Lantist now. However, he had already asked them to send out their elites to save the night elves, and asked them to go deep into the wind forest to fight the elves head-on. Such a request had already exceeded their initial agreement. Now, I can only hope that the Night Elf's flame of freedom has accumulated enough fire seeds. Otherwise, this might become the Night Elf's dark day, Meg thought to himself. Father, we're done bathing. Amy opened the door with a towel wrapped around her. Ugly Duckling stuck its wet head out and shook its head. It squatted there and licked its wet paws with a resentful expression. All right, I'll dry your hair. Meg picked up the dry towel that was prepared at the side, and walked into the bathroom. He first wiped the two little fellows' wet hair, and then used the hairdryer to dry it. Amy had a head of fluffy silver hair. She hugged Meg's arm and said coquettishly, Father, can we sleep with you tonight? Big sister Anna and I want to hear you tell us the story of Neza. The birth of the demon child. Anna also looked at Meg expectantly. Bookhouse reading website. Chapter 1422. Actually, you didn't have to come back. In the dark room, only a dim oil lamp was lit. Vincent looked at Blower with a complex expression, and he seemed to have aged a lot. You knew I would come back, Blower replied calmly. The room fell into silence, and the light from the oil lamp flickered slightly. Vincent said with a worried expression, the Billy family has never been in such a dangerous situation before. Elliot wants to break the engagement between you and Sally, and he's willing to sacrifice the entire Billy family. Now, the only hope is that you can maintain the engagement with Sally and marry her. That's what you said when you made me agree to this engagement. Blower's lips curled up into a mocking smile. Vincent looked at Blower with his mouth open. His throat moved, and he closed it again. He sighed with a dejected expression. You should know about the Night Elves, right? Blower asked. When Borg's army besieged the underground cavern, the warriors of the Billy family and I were also there. Vincent nodded. At that time, I was on the underground cavern that you besieged. Blower looked at Vincent with a smile. You. Vincent's eyes widened in shock as he stared at Blower. After a long while, his expression gradually eased, and he seemed to have aged a lot. His voice was much lower, and he said with a complicated expression, I guessed it, but I didn't expect you to really be there. I almost lost a son. Freedom is there, and Princess Irina is there. As an elf, shouldn't I be there? You almost lost a son, and the elves almost lost their future. A future that was almost killed by you. You know, the Billy family has been struggling to survive all these years. We couldn't reject Borg's orders, nor could we reject Helena's orders. Freedom is too extravagant for us. As the chief, the most important thing for me is to think of ways to let our family survive, and not talk about the future, Vincent said with a lonely expression. Blower looked at Vincent and questioned, do you think there's any meaning in living like this? Is this really the life that we elves want? Our people have even forgotten what freedom is. Even we, the so-called nobles, still have shackles around our necks. Even if we are served by servants, when have we ever had freedom? Was the wind forest like this 100 years ago? Vincent's face turned pale and he subconsciously took a step back. 100 years ago, the elves had paid a heavy price to drive the invading demons out of the wind forest. Then, under the planning of Her Majesty the Queen and the High Priest, the wind forest was built. At that time, no elf would have thought that the elf race would become like this. Even in the most tragic of wars, the elves still yearned for freedom, but they were all turned into slaves by the extravagant culture and the shackle-like system. That's right. Even though he was the patriarch of a clan, he still lived in fear. This fear didn't come from the enemy, but from his clansmen, the clansmen who had fought side by side with him. Everyone lived in desire and fear. They struggled and fought against each other. For the rights that the elves didn't care about the least, they gave up the freedom that they had upheld for thousands of years and willingly became a link in the chain. During this period of time, the young people in our tribe have become a little mysterious. They would secretly gather after everyone had fallen asleep, and they would talk about freedom behind our backs. It was as if their eyes were glowing. Vincent looked up at Blower. Their expressions are just like yours. Blower's gaze froze, and he subconsciously clenched his fists. Recently, Helena has captured many young people. She called them traitors and night elves infiltrators. She also gave a secret order to every noble's territory to capture all those who talked about freedom and throw them into the dungeon. Vincent glanced at Blower's fists and continued, "Tomorrow, at Sally's conferring ceremony, these young people will be publicly executed to deter those elves who are ready to make trouble." "This is tyranny," Blower said in a low voice as he bit his lips. "This world won't reason with you. Just like in order to stop this marriage, the Brewster family's assassins might already be on their way. In order to become an existence like Borg, Elliot will kill everyone who stands in his way at all costs." Vincent shook his head. Blower looked at Vincent and was silent for a while. He slowly let go of his fists, and then tried his best to say calmly, "You didn't capture those young people, and you didn't send them to Helena." "Yes, that's not like me at all." Vincent nodded. His gaze landed on the oil lamp at the side. He looked at the flickering candlelight and softly said, "What's wrong with pursuing freedom? Didn't we fight so hard for freedom back then?" In a secret chamber in the Brewster family, 5 or 6 elves were sitting in a row. Elliot was sitting in the main seat. The flickering candlelight made his gloomy face look even scarier. Everyone in the secret chamber also had solemn expressions. They didn't say anything, as if they were waiting for something. An elf in a black robe quickly strode in from outside. He half knelt on the ground and respectfully said, "Family leader, the assassins have arrived. Should we set off now?" A cold smile appeared on Elliot's face as he said, "That old bastard Vincent doesn't know what's good for him. If he doesn't want to cancel the marriage, then don't blame me for being cruel. Since his son has already appeared, then let's kill him. A dead man can't marry our princess." "Yes." That elf replied, and got up to leave. "Family leader, High Priestess Helena has sent a secret letter." Right at this moment, an elf quickly ran in, and presented a secret letter with a starry sky seal on it with both hands. All the elves in the secret chamber looked at the secret letter in Elliot's hands. Elliot accepted the secret letter. The starry sky seal on the letter was automatically removed, and a piece of black paper fell into Elliot's hands. Elliot lowered his head to look at the letter, and his expression changed. In the end, he angrily crumpled the letter into a ball of scrap paper and turned it into dust in his hands. All the elves looked at one another. They didn't know anything, and they didn't dare to ask anything. "Cancel the plan. Let him live for now," Elliot said in a low voice with a strong sense of indignation. "This Neza, we have to start from the chaos essence bead that was born from heaven and earth." Meg hadn't finished telling Neza's story yet, but the 2 little fellows had already fallen asleep in his arms. Ugly Duckling was also sleeping soundly while hugging his leg. Meg smiled with a resigned expression. He carefully got up, laid the 2 little fellows down, and covered them with a blanket. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief after putting Ugly Duckling between them. "Come to my room," Irina said as she stood at the door. Then, she turned and left. Bookhouse Reading Website. Chapter 1423. Mag was stunned. He felt as if he had heard wrongly. "Inviting me in the middle of the night, there must be some script that we need to read together. As a clean and honest gentleman, at this time." Meg looked at himself in the mirror. He had taken a shower and changed into a flamboyant flowery shirt. The shirt was half-buttoned, and his chest and 8-pack abs were faintly discernible. His half-wet hair was a bit messy and sexy, and his melancholy eyes. Didn't he say that he was a gentleman? Why did he change so naturally, as if he had already prepared for it? Meg stood up straight, buttoned up his shirt, and combed his hair into an adult style. He couldn't help but sigh as he looked at his sanctimonious self in the mirror. No matter how decent he looked, he was still the perfect uncle that all those ignorant girls wanted to throw themselves at. It couldn't be helped. When it came to looks, it wasn't something that he could casually control. Right, system, do you have that thing here? Meg suddenly thought of something. The kind that does it 7 times a night. What the hell is that? Do I look like someone who needs that kind of thing? Now the outside world is saying that you can't do it. Who's spreading the rumors? Don't they know that rumors are now crimes? But it's not illegal to speak the truth. The system retorted. Scram. Meg still bought an industrial textile skill book from the system, and then took the book to the next room. Meg pushed open the familiar bedroom door, coughed lightly before entering, and then walked in. Irina wasn't in the room, and the sound of running water came from the bedroom next to it. Meg raised his eyebrows slightly. It was a very familiar rhythm. Would she forget to bring a bath towel next? You, give me the bath towel. Sure enough, as soon as the sound of running water stopped, the bathroom door opened a crack, and Irina's voice sounded. Okay. Meg got up, picked up the bathrobe on the side, and walked towards the bathroom, but he couldn't help but complain in his heart, come on, girl, you're a 10th-tier great magician. Why would you need a bathrobe to cast a water-dispelling spell? Of course, Meg naturally wouldn't say such words. After all, girls were shy. They wanted something to happen, but they couldn't let themselves show too much initiative. They would always show some seemingly stupid behavior. Meg put the bathrobe in front of the door and was about to say something like, why don't we take a shower together? The bathrobe disappeared with a whoosh, and then the bathroom door was tightly shut again. The lily-white hand that he expected to reach out of the bathroom and pull him in did not appear. Meg touched his nose awkwardly. It seemed that he was thinking too much. Soon, Irina, who was wearing a fairy nightgown, walked out of the bathroom. She waved her hand, and her wet hair was dry. She looked at Meg, who was sitting on the chair beside the bed, and said, I've already spread the news, but I can't be sure how many elves will respond. Helena might use the power of the entire race to set up a trap to deal with you and me, so the strength of the various territories must be weak. There won't be a second chance like this. The night elves in the Wind Forest must also be aware of this. Meg said with a relaxed expression, Helena wants to give us a surprise, and I hope the surprise we give her will be bigger. Irina walked to the bedside and sat down, then leaned against the headboard lazily. She looked at Meg with a pair of blue eyes, and said with a smile, Your bed is occupied by 2 little fellows. Where do you plan to sleep tonight? Speaking of which, this is my bed. Meg looked at Irina and asked with a smile, I wonder when you plan to return half of it to me. Irina's ears were a little red from being stared at by Meg. She snorted softly and said, The bed is mine. You sleep on the floor. This is really intolerable. Meg sighed in his heart. But what could he do? He couldn't beat her, and even if he could, he wouldn't dare to do it. He had no choice but to lay down on the floor mattress again, and lay down on the floor mattress obediently. With the existence of floor heating and a thick mattress, it wasn't uncomfortable to sleep on the floor mattress at all. It was just that there was a strange feeling in his heart. Then, good night, Meg said, and turned off the light gently. Irina responded. The room was quiet, and the moonlight spilled in through the half-opened curtains. Meg closed his eyes and tried to relax, but his heart was beating faster and faster. He couldn't calm down and sleep. This was the first time they slept in the same room together. Although they didn't sleep on the same bed, they could feel each other's breathing. This was a very strange feeling. He knew she wasn't asleep, because he could feel her breathing speed up. Irina turned her head and looked in Meg's direction. Her face showed some displeasure, and her heart was angry. This blockhead, is he really sleeping on the floor? Meg began to hypnotize himself. She just pitied me for not having a place to sleep, so she gave me a mattress on the floor. Hurry up and sleep, sleep. Just as Mag was about to fall asleep in a daze, he suddenly heard a few rustling sounds. Then, a soft and warm body appeared in his arms, and a faint fragrance wafted over. Meg was stunned for a moment before he realized that she seemed to have crawled into his bed and into his arms. At a time like this, there were usually two choices. 1. Push her away and tell her seriously that he was not a casual person, and that she couldn't do this to him. 2. Hug her and let nature take its course, and then let her take responsibility. As an adult, Meg naturally hugged her gently. Her soft and plump body was as if it was made of water. "Do you think we will die?" Irina said softly. Meg's hand stopped. After a moment of silence, he whispered in her ear, "Yes, but not now." The corners of Irina's lips curled up into a radiant smile as she leaned comfortably against his sturdy chest. "It's still so warm. Because my heart is still burning for you." Meg's hand slowly tightened, and he slowly hugged her tightly. All the distracting thoughts disappeared at this moment. He just wanted to hug her like this, quietly and tightly, as if everything was perfect. "Mushy," Irina said with a hint of disdain. Her slightly blushed cheeks were pressed against his chest, and she couldn't hide the smile on her face as she listened to his heartbeat and the scorching temperature. "It really only costs 998 yuan per box." A line of rice-sized words slowly floated through Meg's mind. No pop-up window. Chapter 14:24. Beautiful things happened every day. For example, when he woke up, there were two adorable elves in his arms, one big and one small. His life would be complete all of a sudden, eh? That's not right. Meg lowered his head and looked at Amy, who had unknowingly run into his other arm and was looking at him with her big blue eyes. He couldn't help but be stunned. "Father, you're really, really, really too much. You actually secretly came over to hug Mother to sleep and left me aside. Am I not your most precious baby anymore?" Amy said with an aggrieved expression. "How could that be?" Meg's expression was slightly awkward. He didn't expect to be caught red-handed. Irina opened her eyes at some point and looked at Meg with a smile. "Tell me, is this little cutie who spends your money, lives in your house, and wants to crawl into your arms more important, or am I more important?" Meg hugged Amy and Irina and said with a smile, "Only children make choices. I'm more important." I don't care. If Amy is unhappy, she'll need a lot of good food to appease her." Unmoved, Amy snorted softly. All right, it's Father's fault. Father will wake up and make good food for Amy. Tell me, what do you want to eat? Father will make it for you this morning." Meg got up with a smile and tidied up his slightly messy clothes. "I want to eat." Amy thought seriously for a while and said, "Youtiao, soy milk, beggar's chicken, and durian pizza." "Okay, Father will make it for you now." Meg smiled and rubbed Amy's hair, then looked at Irina tenderly and said, "Then, I'll make breakfast for you. I also want to eat good food." Irina looked at Meg and said in a tone that didn't allow him to refuse. However, her expression was also a little cute, which was a little different from her usual queenly temperament. "Okay, I'll make it for you." Meg nodded with a smile and walked out of the door. Just as he reached the door, he saw Anna walking out barefoot from the room next door with Ugly Duckling in her arms. When she saw Meg, she asked curiously, "Uncle Meg, have you seen Amy?" "Amy is in the room next door. She's hungry, so she woke up early to ask me to make breakfast for her," Meg said with a smile. "Oh, I see." Anna nodded and relaxed. She glanced at the room next door. Then, she asked curiously, "Uncle Meg, last night, where does Princess Irina sleep?" "Amy went." "Amy's. Oh, you two went together, right?" Anna nodded with a thoughtful expression. Meg bent down to pick up the little shoes at the door. He squatted down to help Anna put them on as he asked with a smile, "Anna, do you have anything you want to eat in the morning?" I'll eat whatever everyone is eating. Everything that Uncle Meg cooks is super delicious." Anna smiled sweetly. "You must have smeared honey on your lips early in the morning." Meg stroked Anna's hair with a smile, and then turned to go downstairs. Anna followed behind Meg with Ugly Duckling in her arms, and whispered, "Uncle Meg, can I ask you a question?" Meg stopped at the entrance of the kitchen, and turned to look at Anna. "Do you know why Big Brother Blower left?" Anna looked at Meg with a perplexed expression. Princess Irina was in Mamie's now, so why did he have to leave? "Anna, Master Blower will always be busy for a period of time. He will come back after he's done with his matters," Meg consoled her. According to the information he had received from the Grey Temple, Blower was most likely preparing for his marriage with Sally. This was a political marriage that would determine the rise and fall of the two families, and it was completely different from when they had first agreed to the engagement. However, when the Brewster family chose to break this marriage contract, Sally, who could already be called the new Elven princess, chose to persist, and requested to announce the marriage contract publicly during the conferring ceremony. Meg didn't believe that there was an unforgettable love between them. Sally chose to continue this marriage contract more to protect the Billy family and Blower. It was also a political marriage contract, but it had already deviated from the original intentions of the two families. Meg didn't know how to explain these things to Anna. Since Blower chose to hide it, there was no reason for him to expose him. Anna's eyes dimmed, and she nodded gently. "Amy said she wanted to eat durian pizza just now. Anna, do you want to try durian that hasn't been made into pizza?" Meg asked. "Durian that hasn't been roasted?" Anna's eyes lit up with curiosity. "Yes. Durian is actually a type of fruit. It can be eaten without roasting." Meg nodded and walked into the kitchen. Anna placed Ugly Duckling on the ground, and followed him into the kitchen. She was indeed curious about what that delicious durian looked like, and what it would taste like before it was made into a delicious pizza. Ugly Duckling followed and wagged its tail at Meg. Little Mistress wasn't around, so this was a very good opportunity. It had to make use of this opportunity to get more out of it. Otherwise, it would definitely be punished to run again. Meg took out a slightly smaller durian from the fridge, and the durian's fragrance instantly wafted out. Meow! Ugly Duckling's hair stood on end, and it dashed out of the kitchen with a whoosh. It stared at the durian in Meg's hand with a look of horror. "Why does it smell like this? It smells so good." Anna's eyes lit up as she looked at the hedgehog-like durian in Meg's hand in shock. Meg placed the durian on the counter, and pried it open from the crack, revealing the full durian meat inside. The plump flesh looked very tempting, and the durian's fragrance in the air also became a little stronger. Meg took out a small plate, and then took out a piece of durian meat. He passed it to Anna along with a small spoon, and smilingly said, "Eat." "Thank you, Uncle Meg." Anna received the plate, and then scooped a spoonful of durian meat with the spoon. She could feel the delicate texture, and then put it into her mouth. The slightly cold durian meat had a smooth texture like ice cream, and its unique sweetness was perfectly displayed in the pure flesh. It was like a mischievous child jumping between her teeth, and then blossoming into a breathtaking delicacy. A blissful smile appeared on Anna's face. The durian that wasn't made into a pizza was also a pleasant surprise. It smells so good. Amy had come downstairs at some point, and jumped into the kitchen. Her gaze landed on the durian in Anna's hand, and she went up to her with small steps. She pouted her little mouth, and said coquettishly, "Big sister Anna, can you let me have a bite too?" "Just a small bite is enough." Bookhouse Reading Website. Chapter 14:25. After a sumptuous breakfast, Meg sent Amy and Anna to the ice cream shop and asked Mia to take care of them for a day before returning to the restaurant. "Are you ready to set off?" Irina asked Meg. "Yes." "Wait for me to go upstairs and change." Meg nodded and hurried upstairs to change into a full set of equipment, including the mask. "Let's go." Irina grabbed Meg's hand. A green light flashed under their feet, and the two disappeared from the restaurant. An elf quickly walked into the starry cavern, and respectfully said to Helena, who was standing on the high platform, "High Priestess, the spell formation is ready. As long as Irina and Alex dare to come, we will definitely be able to capture or kill them. Don't let your guard down. Everyone has already witnessed the wind forest once. I don't want the same thing to happen again," Helena said in a cold voice. "Yes." That elf's expression froze, and he bowed before leaving the cavern. Helena looked up at the largest star in the starry sky, and murmured to herself, "Your Majesty, I had no choice but to do this. For the future of the elven race, I had to do this. All of those bastards who tried to destroy everything we've built deserve to die." In the wind forest, the nobles were dressed in splendid attire, and were riding in luxurious carriages to Life Square. Today was the conferring ceremony of the new elven princess, and it would be held in Life Square in front of the Tree of Life. Sally would receive the blessings and recognition of the Tree of Life. After Princess Irina was deposed, the Wind Forest no longer had a princess, so this was a very important matter for the Wind Forest. Almost all the elves knew about this, but only the nobles were qualified to attend the conferring ceremony. The servants and slaves were locked in their homes to continue working. Ordinary elves were also barred from the ceremony area and were not qualified to watch the ceremony. However, although ordinary elves didn't have the right to watch the coronation ceremony of the elven princess, they could watch the execution of the 100 or so elves who were deemed traitors up close. The execution platform was set up outside the sealed area. The elves who were called traitors were locked up in metal cages, and their hands and feet were chained up with heavy metal chains. There were countless wounds of various sizes on their bodies, all of which were left behind by torture and whipping. However, there was not the slightest trace of fear on the faces and eyes of the elves. They were like silent stones trapped in the iron cage, looking at the elves outside the iron cage with unswerving determination in their eyes. The elves outside the cages also silently looked at their brethren in the cages. They looked at the black iron bars, and in a trance, they couldn't even tell if they were inside or outside the cages. "Mother, why are they locked in cages? Are they bad people?" A little boy tugged at his mother's clothes and whispered. The young elf shook his head and softly said, "No, they are only here because they are seeking freedom." "Freedom? What's that?" the little boy asked curiously. Sure, the young mother covered the child's mouth, and looked around nervously. After making sure that the elves beside her weren't paying attention to them, she whispered, "That is something that cannot be said." "Oh." The little boy nodded as if he understood. Although he didn't quite understand why his mother was so nervous, it had to be something very scary for these elves to be locked up. The grand ceremony was being prepared for the coronation of the new princess. However, there wasn't much of a joyous atmosphere in the Wind Forest. Instead, there was a sense of nervousness. The elves who were in charge of guarding had already knocked their bows, and were nervously looking at the ordinary elves who were surrounding them. There was an undercurrent in the entire forest. On the luxurious carriage, Vincent looked at Blower, who was sitting opposite him, and said, "The order has been confirmed. During the coronation ceremony today, Sally will announce your engagement with her. This means that you may become the husband of the queen in the future, and have a noble status in the Wind Forest. At the same time, hundreds of night elves will die." Blower lifted a corner of the carriage's curtain and looked out. The ordinary elves were blocked outside the square, and he said with a sad and mocking expression, "When I was young, I heard from my grandmother that countless elves died here in order to protect the Tree of Life. Then, Life Square was built. I wonder if the descendants of those elves who sacrificed their lives for the final victory are blocked outside, and don't even have the right to step into the square." Vincent didn't seem to hear Blower's words, and continued, "The Billy family will have a special status because of you, and will be protected by the princess. In that case, you know what I might do." Blower put down the curtain and looked into Vincent's eyes. Vincent was silent for a while before looking into Blower's eyes. A tragic smile appeared on his face as he said, "Are you trying to use another method to leave the Billy family's name in the history of the elven race?" An elf walked into the luxurious palace and respectfully said to Sally, who was grooming herself, "Miss Sally, Master Elliot is outside. He says he wants to see you. What do you think?" "I'm not seeing him," Sally replied coldly as she looked at herself in the mirror. That elf opened her mouth slightly, and then closed it again. She acknowledged, and quickly turned to leave. After she walked out of the door, she bowed to Elliot, who was standing outside with his hands behind his back, and said, "Master Elliot, Miss Sally is grooming herself, and it's not convenient for her to see you. If you have anything to say to her, please look for her after the conferring ceremony." This fellow. The veins on Elliot's forehead were throbbing. He didn't think Sally would dare to leave him outside the door and refuse to see him. He looked at the luxurious door of the new princess residence and the elven warrior standing in front of it, and suppressed his anger. He put on a nonchalant expression and said, "That's right. She is indeed very busy now. Then, I'll look for her after the conferring ceremony." "Chief, the young mistress doesn't want to see you." "What should we do now?" the elf behind Elliot asked softly with a nervous expression. "I'm afraid there's no other way today. However, I heard that Vincent's youngest son has been very weak since he was young. It wouldn't be strange if he suddenly died of an illness in the future, right?" Elliot sneered. "Not strange, not strange." That elf's eyes lit up, and he nodded. "I can teleport directly to the Tree of Life. I'll leave everything outside to you." Irina looked at Meg as the griffin landed quietly outside the Wind Forest. A green teleportation magic formation appeared beneath her feet. "All right." Meg nodded. He watched as Irina left. He patted the griffin's neck gently, and said, "Aw Z, it's up to us now." Chapter 1426. Comrades, I received a secret letter from Her Highness last night. The opportunity that we have been waiting for is finally here. Those nobles have taken away the most elite soldiers in the territory, and locked the servants and slaves in the dungeons. We are going to break out of the dungeons, rescue our brothers and sisters who have been locked up, and liberate this territory. In a dimly lit cellar, an elf looked at the young faces present, and said with some excitement in his voice, "Liberate the territory, rescue the slaves." All the elves replied softly. They were also unable to contain their excitement as they gripped the weapons and magic staffs that they carried with them. The conferring ceremony is about to begin. It's time for us to act. Her Highness and all our brothers who have been captured will buy us some time. We can only rely on ourselves for the matters in the territory." That elf slowly drew out his sword, and then said in a low voice, "For freedom. For freedom." All the elves stood up and raised their weapons. They followed that leading elf out of the cellar, and began to act. The same thing was happening in all the territories in the Wind Forest. Those elves who had obtained freedom and faith began to gather under the call of the Night Elves. Then, they picked up their weapons, broke through the layers of locked dungeons, and began to liberate the slaves. Among them, there were low-level elves, noble elves who were deeply inspired, and elves who were guarding the territory. The elves who were guarding the dungeons were either captured or killed. Many of them chose to join those elves after they found out their intentions. The chains of the dungeons were smashed open, and those slaves and servants who were locked up in the dungeons were freed. The heavy chains on their hands and feet were released. "You are all free," the Night Elves shouted as they looked at those elves who were still in a daze. Freedom. A glimmer of light appeared in the eyes of those expressionless elves. They seemed to have understood something, and their expressions gradually became excited. "Now, we are going to leave this place, leave the Wind Forest, and head south to Chaos City. Princess Irina has already built a base there. We will be able to live a free life there," the Night Elves said. Said the leader of the Night Elves. He led the slaves and elves out of the cellar, and brought along the ordinary elves and elven guards who volunteered to join. He opened the stables and magic beast gardens of the nobles, and rode horses or magic beasts towards the south. The elven guards who tried to resist were either killed or captured and thrown into the dungeon. The Wind Forest was filled with black smoke. This was the signal for help from the nobles' territories. It was like a huge fire was burning everywhere in the Wind Forest. It had already spread to every corner and was burning fiercely. Looks like the infiltration was very successful. What a spectacular scene. Meg sat on Z's back and looked down at the burning the Wind Forest with a smile on his face. The performance of the Night Elves was completely out of his expectations. Previously, he had floated over the territories of several elves and did not find a chance to attack. This was because the Night Elves had successfully rescued the slaves and opened the stables of the nobles. They then brought the slaves on the long journey. Good execution, as well as the sympathy of ordinary elves, made the operation smoother than expected. At the same time, in front of Life Square, the conferring ceremony had officially begun. The elven nobles, who were dressed in extravagant clothing, stood in the square according to their status. The leaders of the 8 major families stood at the front, and Elliot stood in the middle. Everyone knew that from today onwards, the Brewster family would become the noblest family in the Wind Forest. Meanwhile, Vincent stood in the corner. The Billy family was also the focus of today's conferring ceremony. However, the gazes of the elves did not linger on Vincent for long. Instead, they all landed on Blower, who was standing beside him. Today, Blower was wearing a blue robe, and it made his handsome features even more outstanding. Even in the elven race, which was a race of exceptional beauty, he still stood out from the rest. Many of the noblewomen couldn't help but steal glances at him with wide eyes. No one would have thought that the 3rd young master of the Billy family, who was rumored to not be very good, would actually be so handsome. Furthermore, he had a 7th-tier power, just like Miss Sally. It was clear that he was extremely talented. The elves who had initially thought that the Billy family was a toad lusting after a swan, and that they were purposely trying to latch onto the Brewster family and young Mistress Sally. Now, however, they were starting to take a closer look. Perhaps Princess Sally really did like this young Master Blower. Blower stood there with a cold expression, but he could not hide the anxiety in the depths of his eyes. He had also received a letter from Chaos City last night. It was a very bold operation, but it was also very much in line with Princess Irina's character. His comrades from the Night Elves should already be on the move now. After the elites were deployed here to guard the conferring ceremony, all the families were very empty internally. Perhaps the operation really had a chance of succeeding. Once the operation to free the slaves was successful, it would definitely be a drastic operation for the elves. There would be a huge change in the current structure. It was equivalent to removing the bottom layer of the exploited class. What would the elven nobles do after they lost their slaves? This was definitely a difficult problem for the rulers. He could not do anything now. Once his identity was exposed, the entire Billy family would die for him. However, a hint of coldness and mockery appeared in Blower's eyes at the sight of all of the elven nobles who were still bragging about their extravagant outfits and how many slaves and servants they had. All of that was going to disappear soon. Hopefully, these guys wouldn't look too bad when they fell from the heavens. Dong! A melodious bell rang, and the life square gradually quietened down. A light flashed on the platform in front of the Tree of Life, and Helena appeared on the platform. She looked down at the elven nobles below, and calmly said, "Today, I will host the conferring ceremony on behalf of Her Majesty the Queen, and officially confer Sally as the new elven princess." A white jade carriage pulled by 9 pure white unicorns stopped in front of the square. Sally, who was wearing a luxurious silver dress, walked out. Her gaze swept past all the elves present, and landed on Blower. She paused for a moment before retracting her gaze. She walked down the white jade steps slowly, and walked towards the platform in a dignified manner. As expected of the elf chosen by the high priest. Princess Sally's disposition is just like a queen's. We elves finally have our own princess again. This is really good news. The elves looked at Sally with unconcealable fanaticism in their eyes. Helena looked at Sally with a gratified smile on her face. The regret of not being able to control Irina would become history. She would let Sally become the queen she envisioned, and lead the elves to a stronger future. Chapter 14:27. The music began to play, and the elves looked at Sally with fervent eyes as she ascended the platform. They were witnessing the history of the elven race. A new elven princess was about to ascend the throne, and she might even become the new queen in the future. However, most of the elves had forgotten that this music had once been played in the sky above the wind forest during wartime. It was known as the sound of freedom. The tens of thousands of branches of the Tree of Life swayed gently as if it were reminiscing the past. Elliot's eyes shone with excitement. Every step that Sally took meant that the Brewster family's status had risen. Among the 8 major families, the Brewster family status would truly transcend with Sally becoming the elven princess. Vincent glanced at Blower with a complicated expression and a hint of guilt in his heart. Sally finally ascended the platform and stood at the same height as Helena. She looked down with a calm expression. There wasn't a hint of ecstasy from becoming the elven princess. It was as if everything that was happening now had nothing to do with her. Helena looked at Sally with satisfaction. Although Sally's power and talent were inferior to Irina's, her temperament and mentality were far superior to her peers. This was why she had chosen Sally. She didn't have much time left, but it was enough for her to nurture Sally into the true queen of the elves. As for Elliot, a hint of mockery flashed through Helena's eyes. No one could control the elven queen. She couldn't, and the idiot Elliot couldn't either. However, his existence and that of the Brewster family would make it easier for Sally to control the other major families. Helena raised her hands, and all the elves quieted down. She then said, "Her Majesty is still in seclusion, but we can't just leave the elven princess empty. Today, I will host the conferring ceremony on behalf of Her Majesty. Under the witness of the Tree of Life, I confer Sally as the new elven princess." All the elves looked at Sally with burning eyes. Irina had tried to overthrow the system of the elven race and turn them into dust. Now, they were about to have a new princess who would lead them to continue their glory and enjoy a high status. After the princess ascends to the throne, she will give the order to hang all the traitors who tried to overthrow the Wind Forest to express our determination to defend the ruling authority. She will also warn those who have been bewitched that meaningless resistance will only lead to death and will not bring about any change. Helena's cold voice was filled with warning as she swept her gaze across all of the elves below the stage. Pity flashed through some of the elves' eyes, while others avoided Helena's gaze in panic. However, there were even more elves with fanatical joy in their eyes. Everyone knew that the night elves who had joined the darkness would die today, but they didn't expect that this order would be given by Sally. Helena's gaze stopped on Blower. Blower also didn't avert his gaze. Instead, he met Helena's gaze with a calm expression. There was no pity or elation in his eyes, and it was as if he had no reaction to Helena's words. A hint of surprise flashed across Helena's eyes. She had investigated all the young elves, but she didn't pay much attention to this third young master of the Billy family who didn't have a good reputation. She only learned about him after Sally requested to extend the marriage contract. Now, it seemed like he was even more surprising than what she had heard in the reports. If he can be obedient, letting him become the male elf behind the queen is also a good choice. None of the young elves are worthy of Sally now, Helena thought. Sally's fingers twitched when she heard Helena's words. Although she still looked calm, it was obvious that she wasn't calm inside. Helena looked at Sally and said in a voice that only the two of them could hear, "The transition of power is inevitably bloody. If you want to gain the respect and support of these fellows below the stage, then you have to tell them that you are on their side and show enough determination. Sally looked at her and didn't answer. Helena didn't care. She raised her right hand, and a silver light gradually condensed on her palm. A silver crown appeared on her palm, emitting a dazzling silver light. The music suddenly stopped, and the square quieted down. The elves looked up at the silver crown with reverence in their eyes. The queen wore the golden crown, while the silver crown belonged to the princess. After wearing the silver crown, it meant that Sally would officially become the new elven princess. She would have a noble status that was second only to the queen. "Sally, come forward," Helena said to Sally. Sally looked at the silver crown floating in the air, and hesitated for a moment before slowly walking in front of Helena. "Sally, are you willing to become the elven princess and protect the Wind Forest and all the elven citizens?" Helena asked loudly as she looked into Sally's eyes. Her voice spread throughout Life Square, and even the elves watching from the outside could hear her clearly. All the elves held their breaths and stared intently at Sally, waiting for the historic moment to arrive. Sally looked at Helena, and was silent for a moment. Her gaze gradually became determined, and she nodded solemnly. "I am willing to protect the Wind Forest and all the elven citizens." Her voice also reverberated throughout the entire Wind Forest, and she placed extra emphasis on the last few words. "Very good. Then I shall confer you the title of Elven Princess on behalf of Her Majesty. You shall bear the heavy responsibility of protecting the elven race." Helena nodded slightly, and put the silver crown on Sally's head with a solemn expression on her face. The silver crown shone brightly under the sun. Sally, who was wearing a silver dress, seemed to have a noble and queenly aura as she stood on the platform. All the elves seemed to see Irina's shadow in her. "Princess Sally! Princess Sally!" The elves in the square half knelt on the ground and saluted Sally, and then cheered. They had witnessed a historic moment. After Irina betrayed the Wind Forest, they had a new princess, a princess who stood on their side. Most of the elves in the square had gratified smiles on their faces. This development was very much in line with their expectations. They and their descendants would continue to rule this forest for many years to come, and enjoy a high status. Helena raised her hand, and the square gradually quieted down again. The elves slowly stood up, and stared at the tree of life behind the platform with fervent gazes. Every elven princess would receive the blessing of the sacred tree of life and its protection, as well as an increase in strength. Great God of life, your sincere believer and servant, I pray for your witness to let the tree of life acknowledge Sally's identity and become her companion tree. Helena half knelt in front of the tree of life and prayed sincerely. Are you worthy? A mocking voice sounded from the direction of the tree of life. Chapter 14:28. Irina. There was dead silence in the square instantly. All the elves raised their heads and looked at Irina, who had appeared on the crown of the tree of life, in disbelief. Their expressions changed drastically. Sally raised her head in surprise, but her expression quickly changed again. She couldn't help but feel nervous when she thought of the various schemes that Helena might have set up. As expected, Princess Irina came. Blower looked up at Irina, who was still wearing her flowing white dress, and a smile appeared on his face. This was the Princess Irina that he knew. Even if the whole world knew that this was a plot against her, she would definitely appear as long as she set her mind on something. She couldn't just sit by and watch the night elves be publicly executed, so she appeared here. It seemed unreasonable, but it was actually very reasonable. Instead of living humbly, isn't it better to leave a glorious name in history? Blower said softly as he tilted his head slightly. Vincent's pupils contracted suddenly, and his body tensed up unconsciously. He looked at Blower's resolute side profile and Irina, who was standing on the treetop. After a moment of silence, he suddenly revealed a smile. Very good. Blower turned his head to look at Vincent, and solemnly said, Father. Vincent replied in a low voice. Damn Irina. You really came out to ruin our plans again. Elliot gritted his teeth and looked at Irina. He waved his hand, and the elves beside him quickly left. The elves in the square looked at Irina with horror and disgust. There were also many young elves whose eyes lit up with a hint of fanaticism. Irina, who was standing on the crown of the tree, glanced at Helena, who was half kneeling on the ground, and those elves in the square. She sarcastically said, Are you worthy of calling yourselves sincere believers of the God of life? The revelation that the God of life gave you was to enslave your own people? Or to take away the lives of your own people? Irina's voice clearly echoed in Life Square, and also spread outside the square. It clearly reached the ears of the elves who were blocked outside the square, as well as the night elves who were locked in the iron cages. Many elves lowered their heads in shame, not daring to look Irina in the eye. There were also elves who looked at Irina with hatred. She was like a troublemaker who was trying to overthrow everything they had. Princess Irina is here as well. All of the elves who were stopped outside the plaza turned toward the Tree of Life with astonishment in their eyes. Even though she had already been stripped of her status as a princess and branded as a traitor, she still held an irreplaceable position in the eyes of most of the elves. Meanwhile, the freedom that the night elves preached was indeed spreading rapidly in the Wind Forest during this period of time. Although most of the elves were keeping their distance from it, there was a hint of pity and sympathy in their eyes when they heard Irina's words and looked at those elves who were locked up in the metal cages. Her Highness is here. The night elves who were locked in the iron cages finally had some changes in their expressions. Their eyes seemed to have suddenly lit up, and they all turned to look in the direction of the Tree of Life. They had not been abandoned. Despite the dangers, Her Highness still came here. It was the conferring ceremony of the new elven princess, and Irina, the former princess, had appeared. How this conferring ceremony was going to proceed became a matter of concern for all the elves. Irina, you really came. Helena stood up slowly, and looked up at Irina. There was no surprise in her eyes, but her expression was exceptionally cold. The whole world knows that I'm coming. If I don't come, won't I disappoint the world? Irina looked at Helena and revealed a bright smile. Then you should know the consequences of your appearance here. Helena raised her hand, and a complicated array formation lit up with the Tree of Life as the center, forming a barrier that enveloped Irina and the Tree of Life at the same time. The 10th-tier powerhouses of the 8 big families appeared outside the array formation with weapons and magic casters' staffs in their hands. They looked at Irina nervously. More advanced elven magic casters appeared outside the array formation with magic casters' staffs in their hands. They were also nervous as they aimed at Irina, who was standing on the Tree of Life. In order to target Irina, the Night Elves had almost mobilized the entire race. Such a battle array had never appeared in the Night Elves, except for the previous siege of the underground cavern. When the elves saw this scene, they were all a little surprised by High Priestess Helena's arrangement. Could it be that this conferring ceremony was an ambush targeting Irina from the very beginning? And among the elves present, those young elves who had been deeply influenced by freedom all became nervous. They began to gather in the chaos, communicating with their eyes, trying to do something. Irina looked at Helena with a relaxed expression, and said with a somewhat mocking smile, "Helena, you really don't have any confidence in yourself. In order to deal with me, you've almost mobilized the entire race. Wouldn't it be a huge loss for the Night Elves to lose me? Aren't you afraid that the Night Elves will be humiliated because of you?" When many elves heard this, the magic casters' staffs that were aimed at Irina subconsciously lowered a little, and there was some shame in their expressions. Those 10th-tier elves who had been famous for a long time also averted their gazes. The battle in the underground cavern had already made them lose face. If news of the siege today were to spread, the reputation of the elven powerhouses would be completely lost on the continent. Moreover, are you so confident that you can kill me? Irina smiled and raised the magic caster's staff in her hand. The Tree of Life suddenly shone with green light, and the gently drooping branches began to rise slowly. Then, like a green whirlwind, they revolved around Irina's feet. Rays of green light entwined around Irina's body, as if she was wearing a green armor, and formed a green crown on her head. Princess Irina. Princess Irina is the real princess recognized by the God of Life. Only freedom is the faith of the elves, and it is the revelation of the God of Life. The Night Elves in the iron cage shouted loudly with fanaticism in their eyes. "My people, cages and shackles cannot stop us from pursuing freedom. The God of Life has given us the ability and talent to be close to nature, and has given us the power of life in order to bring warmth to the world. I hope that you can all find the true faith of life and truly understand what freedom is," Irina said with a solemn expression. Then, she raised the magic caster's staff in her hand and chanted, "God of Life, please grant me the power to cleanse all darkness and shackles, and let your people regain freedom." You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.